Добрый вечер. Меня коллеги просили сказать несколько слов о результатах нашего телефонного разговора с президентом Соединенных Штатов. Действительно, этот разговор состоялся, продолжался более 2 часов. Хочу отметить, что он был очень содержательным и весьма откровенным. И в целом, на мой взгляд, в этой связи весьма полезным. Прежде всего, я поблагодарил президента Соединенных Штатов за поддержку со стороны США возобновления прямых переговоров между Россией и Украиной по поводу возможного заключения мирного соглашения. По поводу возобновления переговоров, которые были прерваны украинской стороной, как известно, еще в 2022 году. Президент Соединенных Штатов высказал свою позицию по поводу прекращения боевых действий, перемирия. И со своей стороны отметил также, что и Россия выступает за мирное урегулирование украинского кризиса. Мы должны просто определить наиболее эффективные пути движения к миру. Договорились с президентом Соединенных Штатов о том, что Россия предложит и готова работать с украинской стороной над меморандумом по поводу возможного будущего мирного договора с определением ряда позиций, таких как, например, принципы урегулирования, сроки возможного заключения мирного соглашения и так далее, включая и возможное прекращение огня на определенное время в случае достижения соответствующих договоренностей. Кстати говоря, контакты между участниками встречи и переговоров в Стамбуле, они возобновились, и это дает основание полагать, что мы в целом на правильном пути. Еще раз хочу подчеркнуть, что беседа была очень конструктивной, и я ее оцениваю высоко. Вопрос, конечно, в том, чтобы российская и украинская сторона проявили максимум стремления к миру и нашли бы те компромиссы, которые бы устроили все стороны. При этом хочу отметить, что в целом позиция России ясна. Главное для нас – устранить первопричины этого кризиса. Ну, если потребуется что-то уточнить, то пресс-секретарь Песков и мой помощник господин Ушаков разъяснят чуть позднее какие-то детали наших сегодняшних переговоров с президентом Трампом по телефону. Вам спасибо.
I wanted to play that out in its entirety because I wanted you guys to see what was said in regards to Putin coming out in the meeting, because the language is very important in regards to what he is saying in his language. He's being very political. He's being a diplomat. If you notice, the Russian side has been always diplomatic in the way that they've talked about the stuff in comparison to the Trump side, who will put out tweets, will put out screaming headlines and all of this other stuff that Trump typically does on Twitter or social media. But they've always been, contrary to popular belief in the West, open to a ceasefire, probably far more than what some of the hardliners in Russia would want. But the ceasefire has to be rational. And so you got to kind of look at his language in regards to what is being said and what Trump got out of this. Trump got nothing out of this. Maybe you could say the meeting, but Putin proposed the meeting in Istanbul. Trump just co-signed it and said, hey, Zelensky, go to the meeting now, with a hidden undercurrent of or else, just kind of floating behind it without it being said. So you can't even say really got that. You could say that under the Biden administration, the two sides weren't talking. That's fair. But what else did you really get? You really didn't get anything that the Russians weren't already offering. They were offering, though, under certain conditions. And if you listen to what Putin is saying in this, the conditions remain the same. He says we had a substantive and quite frank, okay, each side presented exactly what they thought of their particular terms in regard to some kind of deal or agreement. I would imagine Putin expressed the red lines that Russia had and what their demands were. And I would imagine Trump gave that ridiculous 21-point plan and begging for a ceasefire again, because, again, you want a ceasefire because Zelensky is people are getting chewed alive. And when Russia's putting 30,000 people, volunteers, a month on their military, when they built up 2 additional militaries, including new hardware and everything else, and Ukraine is struggling to get weapons, struggling to get anti-air missiles and whatever else, and snatching people off the streets to throw them in vans, you can understand why the Trump administration, who is backing Zelensky, proxy of the United States, would want a ceasefire to give their people time to rest, recuperate, get more weapons, get more money, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's obvious, right? Donald Trump is acting as if he's mediator when he's a participant in the conflict. It's a nonsense position to pretend as if, well, I didn't have anything to do with this. This is not my war. Okay, well, the CIA, as Mark pointed out, was in Ukraine during the Trump administration. Okay, did the Trump administration have control over the CIA when they were ensconced in Ukraine, pushing and getting things organized? I hope you get my point. The notion that Donald Trump is, I'm just a passerby, an innocent bystander that just so happened he came in to try to mediate the conflict. As I give them weapons, as I give them intelligence, as they fire missiles into Russia, as they try to get back into Kursk, as they try to do all of this stuff with my weapons, my intelligence, my armaments. Yeah, I'm totally just an innocent mediator. It's dishonest on his face. But Putin is not going to call him on it because all things being equal, Russia does want a settlement to the conflict. Look, if you're Russia, what you want out of this is no NATO expansion, diplomatic ties on some level, meaning you want to be safe, ultimately. You want the Russian speakers to be safe. You don't want a batshit crazy government in Ukraine that is whipping up another war in the next 5 or 10 years. You want to settle this issue for once and for good. If that means you go to the border of Poland, then it means you go to the border of Poland. If it means you have to fight a war with Europe later on, then that means you have to fight a war with Europe later on. But those aren't things that you want. You want a settlement. And considering it's the United States that's effectively backing Zelensky, that push this war and provoked it in the first place, then you pretty much have to deal with the US if that's indeed what you want. It is always an option to keep going. But if you can get what you want in the diplomatic sense, then you get what you want in the diplomatic sense. The catch becomes, can you do that? Can the president even offer that? Can the US president accept that the 4 regions are in the Russian constitution belong to Russia? Can they accept a new government in Kiev, getting rid of the Banderites? Can you accept no NATO expansion and having that ensconced into law, where the European Union also validates the fact that this is now a no NATO expansion, a new security architecture of Europe? Can you, as an American president, accept those things? No. The answer is no, you can't. Can Russia accept the nonsense proposals that Donald Trump is coming up with? A ceasefire, well, that's a no on its face for obvious reasons. Can you accept, okay, we'll accept a ceasefire if you don't give them intelligence, you don't give them weapons, you don't, Europe doesn't continue to give them weapons, Germany doesn't continue to give them weapons, the UK doesn't continue to give them weapons, they don't continue to raise their military, they don't continue to grab people off the streets. Okay, well, that's not part of the ceasefire agreement. So again, the answer becomes no. All of these things don't meet. And because all of these things don't meet, the notion that you're going to have some kind of agreement was always dead on arrival. It's a reason I call that video Dead Letter as the title when Donald Trump first put out his peace plan. And Kellogg's plan is even more ludicrous than Donald Trump's original peace plan. I guess those things are the same, the 21-point plan. I guess I'm pointing out that Zelensky doesn't want peace. He's still out there effectively saying NATO is part of the constitution of Ukraine. And so, this is something we effectively have to work towards. Okay, there's that. Europe is still talking about putting troops in Ukraine. Even the Kellogg plan is talking about putting NATO troops in Ukraine. Okay, all of these things are non-starters. So whatever was going to be achieved just because Donald Trump gets on the phone and talks to Putin. Hey, Vladimir. Hey, Donald. Nice music you listen to. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Hey, let's talk about the ceasefire. Okay, let's talk about the ceasefire. This is what we need. We need the Ukrainian troops to leave the areas that now belong to Russia. We need no NATO expansion. We need that enshrined into law. We need protection for the Russian speakers that are in the remainder of Ukraine. We need the banderites to be out of government, meaning we need to denazify Ukraine. And we need Ukraine to validate that these regions are now part of the Russian Federation. Oh, Vladdy, that's a tall order, buddy, for the U.S. president. How about this? What if, we call a ceasefire now, unconditional. We put NATO troops in Ukraine. We take over the power plant in Zaporozhye. Okay, niet. You can stop there, Donald. Niet. No. We're not on the same page. No. Okay, well, I don't want to look like an asshole when I go back and tell the people that you effectively told me to go F myself. So what if we come up with a memorandum of understanding on the pathway to end the conflict? Okay, we can do that. I mean, look, we want a ceasefire too, meaning Russia. We want a ceasefire. We want to stop this. We don't want to have our people fighting for another 2 years to take over all of Ukraine. We don't want that. We don't want to go to the border of Poland. Those, racist Western Ukrainers, well, we don't want to have to deal with that. We will if we have to, but we don't want to. So yeah, let's do that. We can do that. And as I pointed out, they're okay with the ceasefire. They said it as much. It's just the US and Europe doesn't want to accept rational terms that you don't continue to build up a military as we have a ceasefire where you freeze the conflict on these lines, you build up another military, and we have to fight this again in a few years after you've rebuilt your forces. This is a non-starter. This is a nonsense proposition. No rational actor would accept it, especially considering we're winning on the battlefield. So I'd imagine what Putin gave Donald Trump, very diplomatically in the way that he does, is a surrender demand. Donald Trump, being a U.S. president, can't accept a surrender demand, despite the fact that even Trump admits, A, it's a proxy war, and B, Russia's going to take all of Ukraine, which means you've lost the proxy war. So they come up with a memorandum of understanding. He said, we'll have direct talks between Russia and Ukraine. He points out that Ukraine was the one that broke off those talks with the West, pushed by the United States, UK, to end the conversation. What Russia is effectively most likely told Trump, we're willing to have negotiations, providing that under the Istanbul lines, meaning what we agreed upon in Istanbul remains true with the addition of the 4 extra regions that we have now put into the Russian constitution. Okay, well, so yeah, we're willing to have direct talks under Istanbul format. We'll do that. That's what we were doing anyway. That's what I asked for. That's what you agreed upon. No issue with that. Russia is never against the ceasefire, a memorandum of peace agreements and principles of the settlement. Okay, well, what does Russia need to end the war? Russia told Ukraine that at the Istanbul II summit. This is what we need to end the war. We need you to leave our regions. Full stop. We call it a day. Ukraine is shocked by that. Europe is shocked by that. Europe is acting as if Russia is somehow stringing Trump along or is maximizing their demands. Their demands were their demands. They told you exactly what they needed in order to end the conflict. They weren't hiding the ball. They weren't stringing him along. They told you like a year ago, hell, you can go back to 2022 at the Istanbul format. This is what we need. Now, considering facts on the ground, those needs have escalated for obvious reasons. And if you keep going, those needs will escalate further. It won't be 4 regions. It will be 8. It will be Odessa, which is what they want anyway. It will be Sumy. It'll be the other regions that they're going to effectively take over. Keep messing around. That's what, just being straightforward. Ceasefire if appropriate agreement is reached. So if we come to terms and you accept our demands, then yeah, we're fine with a ceasefire. Because under those guidelines, no intelligence, no expansion of the military, etc. Meaning, if you accept the guidelines that we put down, we're willing to have a ceasefire as we work this out. If not, any negotiation needs to take place with the military still pushing. The reason that you must understand, the reason that they're so panicky about this in Europe and in the US, I love Alexander McCarris. I think he's getting this wrong though. In one of his videos, he pointed out that he thinks Europe is delusional about the realities on the ground, that they're purely taking their information from Ukraine. And so they're coming to a wrong assessment of the battlefield conditions. I think he's wrong on that. I think Europe doesn't care about Ukrainians any more than America cares about Ukrainians. And if Zelensky and his band of neo-Nazis want to continue fighting, they're willing to have them fight to the last dead Ukrainian. They have their own intelligence services. Are you telling me that Britain doesn't have an intelligence service that can look at the ground and say, hey, Russia's, they're continuously moving westward? France that have intelligence services on the ground saying, hey, they're continuously moving westward. That they're totally relying upon a lying government that's radically corrupt like Ukraine for all of their information about what's taking place on the battlefield. I don't buy that. What I buy is that they fully understand what is happening on the ground. They fully understand the Ukrainian military is getting chewed up. They don't care anymore than America does. From the standpoint of if an agreement is reached, well, again, you have to get an agreement before you get the ceasefire. How do you get the agreement? It's that. So this is political language. If and then statements. Again, they weren't against the ceasefire. If we can come to some kind of deal, some kind of agreement, we can come to terms. If not, we keep going and we keep going and we keep going. We don't care about your sanctions. You haven't been able to change the context on the battlefield. You've thrown every weapon that you can throw in. We will keep going. We will keep fighting this war. If we need to fight it for another year, if we need to fight it for another 2 years, if we need to take Kiev, if we need to take Odessa, we will do all of those things. Understand where we are in this. I have an 80%, if not more, approval rating. It's not going anywhere. We are united in a patriotic mission to beat back the Nazis that you have unleashed to go after our government and our country. It is existential from our point of view. That is the way to look at it. So Putin cannot back down on this. And any language that is being used when he's having a conversation with Donald Trump is consistent with where he was prior to the phone call. And that last part, Russia's position is clear. We want to eliminate the root cause of the crisis. There's no deviation in the position. There's no deviation in anything that he had a conversation with Donald Trump with. We can draw up a memorandum of a peace agreement and principles of settlement, but what do you think those principles are going to be? What do you think Zelensky's principles are going to be for a settlement? Do you think those things are going to match? Zelensky is still out here saying, we're going to be part of NATO. We are not going to give up any territory. And to be very clear, he would be hanging from a flagpole like Mussolini if he did sign a surrender document, which is what the Russians are looking for. You must understand where the sides stand. That's where we are. Donald Trump got nothing out of that phone call that the Russians weren't already saying that they were willing to give, which is effectively, we want your surrender. I could be wrong, just my point of view. Oh, my point is, the Europeans are looking at this kind of like the Americans are looking at the Europeans. From the Americans' point of view, Ukraine is a proxy. That proxy is being used to weaken and damage Russia, to sap the energy out of Russia, to keep the Russian military, or for that matter, Russia, out of other affairs around the globe. That is what they are trying to do. The problem with that is that you have now woken a monster. Well, I don't want to say I'm correcting Alexander McCarris. I would never say I'm correcting him. I just I disagree with him. I could be wrong in my assessment. I just can't believe that they would be that ideologically blind to believe Ukraine. I think that in the same way the U.S. says, Hey, it's not Americans being killed, so it's a bargain for us to put money into it. It's just Ukrainians. I suspect Europe is thinking the exact same thing. And in their minds, we're going to build up our own weapons industry. Germany has just put out a contract where they're apparently going to be building missiles and bullets and these type of things. Okay, well, that's them building up their own militaries while Ukraine is being chewed up. Think of it like a blocking maneuver. Okay, we need to get our troops out. Okay, so we need one guy or two guys to be sacrificial while we get our troops out to safety. Ukraine as a country is that guy, as Europe tries to build up some kind of military capacity with the idea of fighting the Russians at some date, or at the very least being a bulwark against the Russians, as the US moves its affairs to other interests vis-a-vis China. That's my take. That's what I think. And to be very clear on this, where's, what's his name? Am I missing something? No, something like, okay. We'll just keep going. And to make this clear, Donald Trump puts out his tweet saying ceasefire negotiations are going to start immediately. Okay, well, no, because you get Peskov, who pointed out this part. There's no deadline for peace talks. There's no deadline for a memorandum. And again, it's just a memorandum. Each side is going to express what they believe or what they want in regards to some kind of deal. Hey, in your mind, what does a deal, a settlement look like for this conflict? Russia gives theirs, Ukraine gives theirs. Do you honestly think these things are going to meet one another? They're not. And even if you're talking about peace talks, again, the reason that the Russians sent military people there is because the military are the people who know, A, what's going on the ground, B, are the ones that made that sacrifice when they were putting their lives and their bodies on the line to do it. And on some level, they need to be satisfied with whatever deal comes out. You effectively have 1 million men under arms. You want those people satisfied and made whole in regards to any negotiations that take place. Now, the question is Ukraine willing to accept any of these terms? If Zelensky is saying, I am not willing to even give up territory, I am not willing to give up NATO aspirations, how do you come to a deal? How do you come to even an understanding of a deal under those terms? Especially when Russia is effectively saying, we are sticking with the Istanbul format, plus the additional territories that we've taken. Right now, the reason that Europe is so panicky is because what they know is that Russia is planning an offensive. Russia has been building up a huge amount of military. As I said, 2 additional militaries. New kit. You have 300 or 30,000 people joining each month. Those people have been trained. Those people are rested. Those people are ready to go into combat. If you already have, 600,000, let's say 700,000 men on the front lines, and they are already moving forward in an attrition warfare where they're consistently moving forward inexorably westward, what does another 300,000, effectively a third of your current military added, what does that do? What does it look like? Especially if you're Ukraine and you're drafting women and children into the battlefield because you have run out of manpower. What does it look like to you? What does it look like to Europe? Don't you think Europe knows that Russia is planning an offensive? Don't you think that Europe knows, they can see with their own intelligence, hey, they've built 2 militaries. They have one on the Finnish border and they have one in reserve. What do you think the one in reserve is going to do? Hey, what do you think the one in Finland may do when it realizes that Finland is not going to attack Russia? What do you think they're going to do? And what does it look like for the battlefield? That doesn't look good, does it? Hence, the cocaine panic on the train that has been taking place. I'm saying they know it. They know what's coming. They may not be big maneuver warfare, but the fact that they're already being chewed away in this attrition battle, and you're adding 300,000 men to the battlefield with new kit, that doesn't look good. That looks horrible for you. Now, the question for Donald Trump is, what does Trump do going forward? Donald Trump has to make a choice. Zelensky is not going to play ball. Russia is willing to play ball, but they're not going to play ball under your terms. Your terms are absurd. So what does he do? Does he continue to give weapons? Does he walk? Does he walk and continue to give weapons? Does he put sanctions? This idea that it's not your war, however, nobody believes that. You may try to sell that. Nobody believes that. Donald Trump was asked at a press conference recently. I think this was yesterday. Listen to what he says here. He keeps making this argument. It's not my war. You're the president of the United States. Dude, you're giving them money and weapons. You're giving them intelligence. Your HIMARS can't even fire without U.S. permission. Hamas has been firing. It's your war. Own it.
Do you have a red line in your head of what would cause you to back away? And
Yeah, in my head, but not something I'm going to announce. But yeah, definitely in my head I did, yeah. Because this isn't our war. This is not my war. This is not the war. I mean, we got ourselves entangled in something that we shouldn't have been involved in. And we would have been a lot better off. And maybe the whole thing would have been better off because it can't be much worse. It's a real mess. It's a death trap. So I think that, yeah, I would say I do have a certain line. But I don't want to say what that line is because I think it makes the negotiation even more difficult.
Trump could pass sanctions. Russia doesn't care, but he could do it. Trump could continue to send weapons. It's not going to change anything, but he could do it. And maybe he knows it. And maybe in his hearts of hearts, he does want a deal. But you must understand the deal that Donald Trump wants is on U.S. terms. And U.S. terms are not ending a conflict in the real sense of the word, in the way that Russia wants to end the conflict. What Trump wants to do is freeze it with this idea that you can come back to it later. Just because you put something in a constitution, it can be changed. Ukraine had neutrality in its constitution. They changed it to being part of NATO. Just because, somebody says something doesn't mean that can't change in a few years. Look at what Donald Trump has done to all of the deals that he's effectively ripped up. I'm ripping up the JCPOA. I'm ripping up all of the missile agreements that were done between the Soviet Union and the United States, or for that matter, Russia and the United States. They're heartbeat. Why can't the next president do the same thing? You must understand, Moscow lived through the Minsk 1 and 2. They've lived through the Istanbul agreements. There's no trust, nor should there be, if you're a rational actor. J.D. Vance came out, and again, they are saying things that in reality are not looking at it from the Russian position. They're only looking at it from their own point of view, this American point of view that believes other people believe they're love and light, or that is trying to insist that Donald Trump is somehow a mediator in a conflict that he himself is a party to.
Talks have been proceeding for a little while. We realize there's a bit of an impasse here, and I think the president's going to say to President Putin, look, are you serious? Are you real about this? I think, honestly, that President Putin, he doesn't quite know how to get out of the war. This is a little bit of guess, but I think the president would agree that part of this is I'm not sure that Vladimir Putin has a strategy himself for how to unwind the war, of course, that's been going on for a few years now. There's fundamental mistrust between Russia and the West. It's one of the things the president thinks is frankly stupid, that we should be able to move beyond the mistakes that have been made in the past, but that takes two to tango. I know the president's willing to do that.
Have you ever seen somebody in an abusive relationship? Have you? Or for that matter, somebody that was married and had a divorce? I was married. I've been divorced. My ex-wife and I. There's a complicated history between the two people, and there are mistakes that both people make, sometimes one person, but in many cases that both people make, that you can't really unravel that stuff. It's hard to unravel it because you remember everything that took place. And even if there was a fundamental change in the other person, which there's not, by the way, but even if there was, you remember everything that the person did. You know that they knocked over the Ukrainian government in 2014. You know that they put in a bunch of banderites that were riding tanks with Nazi insignias on in Kursk region, which is, again, astonishing, right? You know that they had CIA all throughout the Ukraine. You know that they were firing on the Donbass with the U.S. being viceroy of Ukraine as they were doing it. You know that over the last 3 years that the U.S. provoked the war by expanding NATO to the border, lied about even whether or not they were going to move to an inch to the east. They didn't just move an inch to the east, they moved to the entire border. And you know that in the context of the Minsk 1 and 2 agreements, that you had no plans on fulfilling the obligations of those agreements. Russia knows all of this stuff. They know that you were killing Russians, whether it's 100,000 or 200,000 dead. It's besides the fact that the US was directing those bullets, those bombs, that artillery that killed those Russians. They know that. So you are now like, we should just move past this. It's pretty easy for you to say, considering it wasn't your people being killed by you and your government. This is the point that I'm trying to make here, this American point of view that looks at this stuff like, we should just yada yada past this. No big deal. We think this is stupid. We should just move on. When Europe has taken it as almost an act of faith that they need to continue to expand to the border of Russia to create this Hobbes choice of either you allow yourself to be surrounded with NATO on your border. And again, Ukraine has been a pathway by which the West has invaded Russia multiple times in the last war, killing, 30 million Russians, in the war before that, 10 million. When you know that, and you get somebody like Vance who comes in and is like, we should just move past this. What is your thinking process? What do you think about that in those terms? You would think that person is lost, is ever-loving mind, and is only looking at it from a very specific point of view. And especially when they put out a deal, and the deal is talking about putting American troops in Russian territory to hold the nuclear power plant that is now part of your own constitution. It's absurd. This is absurdity. Donald Trump is still supplying weapons. Donald Trump just signed a mineral deal with Ukraine that is like a Lend-Lease agreement that would allow the U.S. to continue to give weapons. Donald Trump just approved or pushed Germany to give additional armaments, for that matter, told Israel to give additional armaments to Ukraine. They've been going around the world trying to get weapons to give to Ukraine. If Donald Trump was serious, he would have stopped doing that. He would have potentially even just walked. If Donald Trump wants to stop the proxy war, Donald Trump would walk. Trump is not doing that. He's entangling himself in this and is doing exactly the same things that Joe Biden is doing, with the exception of one quirk that he claims he wants to get an agreement, despite the fact that the terms that he's putting for that agreement are nonsense and non-starters. And if you could empathize that this is existential from the Russian point of view, and what they want is no NATO expansion, meaning they want a new security architecture of Europe. That's what they were asking for before the war. That's what they've been asking for the entire time. And under no circumstances is the US willing to give them that, or for that matter, Europe. And so the war continues. And the war continues until Ukraine military is destroyed. It gets so weak that it's on the brink of collapse, where they're forced to the bargaining table, or whether Russia takes Kiev and goes to the Polish border. It's not Putin that doesn't know how to get out the war. He does, militarily, because at some point they will win this. It may be an ugly win. They may lose more people in the process, but they will win it. It may take a year, it may take 2 years, but they will win it. It's not Putin that can't extricate himself from it. It is the West and the US that can't come to terms. What Europe is betting on is that Ukraine can last for another year or so, which gives them time to build up their own stockpiles. The problem that Europe is going to have is pretty straightforward. Can your government support it? Meaning, yes, you can get rid of the candidates in Romania. You can try to get rid of Marine Le Pen in the way that you got rid of Karlin Gorgescu. You can do that. You could try to find ways to get rid of the AfD in Germany. But you're doing that stuff in such a heavy-handed way that the population sees you doing it. Now, maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe you can keep control of those populations as they try to use democracy to force a change in their political affairs. But the moment that you come up with this notion of feeding French to the Russians, feeding Englishmen to the Russians, feeding Germans to the Russians, will your populations accept it? Even with all of the jingoism, even with all the racist rhetoric that you've been using, will they accept going to war, especially if that war is potentially nuclear, considering France and England are nuclear powers? That's the question that they have to deal with. If you're talking about fighting a conventional war with the Russians, you're going to lose. Their production capacity alone outstripes yours. You are unfamiliar with the warfare that you are effectively talking about engaging in. And that's assuming that Europe is even willing to get into a war like that. The point I'm making here is they're feeding Ukraine into a wood chipper knowingly, knowing that Ukraine is collapsing, knowing that they're not going to win, and knowing the situation that is on the battlefield. They just don't care. For them, it's given them time to do something else. Yeah, this is cynical. Yeah, it's pretty disgusting. Ukraine has no way to win the war, and yet Europe still boosts Zelensky's head up. But you must understand, it's not even just Zelensky. Zelensky has a group of people behind him that under no circumstances would allow him to sign a document saying, I'm ending the war. In their minds, there's going to be a miracle at the Vistula. There's going to be some change that happens, some magical door that opens where God gets involved. What is it? Deus Machina, that changes the context of events on the ground. I don't see that. Will it happen? Maybe. I don't see it. And I can't necessarily bet on some miracle to take place when I'm just looking at what is taking place on the battlefield, and I'm looking at logistics, and I'm looking at what Russia has in reserve versus Ukraine effectively being empty in reserve. It's not that the U.S. wouldn't give them the weapons. I'm not even sure the U.S. has the weapons to give in that way. Sure, they're back contracts that Joe Biden signed where weapons are still flowing to Ukraine. But is it enough? Does it meet the gap? And more to the point, do you have even men to carry those weapons into the battlefield? In the first place, do you have women to carry those weapons to the battlefields? The contracts that you offer these kids who get into the battlefield and realize, oh, they lied because my life expectancy is effectively 2 weeks, and it would take years before I'm able to get whatever they were promising me. I'm saying this is where Ukraine is. They're snatching people off the streets in order to throw them into the battlefield. That is not a sustainable pathway. And Europe certainly has to see those videos, has to know it. They have intelligence. Are you telling me that they're unaware of the condition that Ukraine is in this war? So the question for Donald Trump is, what does he do? Putin has effectively told him, kick rocks in a very diplomatic way. Sure, we'll do a memorandum. Okay, whatever. Sure, we'll talk about a ceasefire, providing we get what we want in the ceasefire. Okay, but that's nothing. Trump got a fart in a jar for all intents and purposes. The question at some point is going to come for Donald Trump is, do you walk or do you get more involved? Are you going to pass sanctions like Joe Biden, sanctions that the Russians don't care about? Are you going to add additional weapons? Are you giving more money? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? That is going to be the question that Trump is confronted with. In fact, I would argue that's the question he's confronted with now. And up to this point, he's fenced it where he hasn't, he's, okay, I give a little bit here, I give a little bit there. Russia's not going to accept terms like in Syria, where there was this frozen conflict that everyone pretended as if the conflict was over with. And then in some inopportune moment, it springs up where all of these monsters come out of Idlib and go rummaging through Syria. If you think they're going to accept that when they have given blood and treasure, and they know that the U.S. has been behind it, they know that Europe is behind it, you are out of your mind. And so I have to wonder, is Trump serious about a peace deal? Now, I have to think to myself, maybe he is, but he's so incompetent that he doesn't know anything about the world. So he doesn't understand the Russian position, or maybe he doesn't even care. And he thinks that, well, I'm a US president, I should be able to tell other people what to do. Russia is not your vassal in the way that Europe is. And even your vassal at this point seems to want to keep going in regards to the war. So, no, this phone call didn't yield anything. This phone call was never going to yield anything. And in the context of this phone call, Putin was being very diplomatic and using very diplomatic language. But that diplomatic language inevitably ended up being the exact same thing that was said at the Istanbul agreement, with the add-on of, we'll have a memorandum. They'll do theirs, we'll do ours. we'll see if there's any room for peace. And I would guarantee you there is not. There is not. So we'll see. But I am very skeptical that anything is going to come of any of this, especially considering the things that Vance and Trump are saying. It's not my war. It is your war. It is your war. Well, these people should just be able to get together. Trump thinks it's stupid that they don't trust each other. Okay, I think you're an idiot if you think that. I think you're an idiot if you think that. And Trump was also asked about sanctions. This is what he said on sanctions. It was like, hey, because of course the US media are hollow monkeys, and they make every situation worse when they're analyzing the stuff. Look, I was there at the Biden-Putin summit where Joe Biden and Putin talked because Joe Biden felt that communication had broken down. He was getting freaked out by that because he figured, okay, this is a pathway to end up in a larger war. And Joe Biden and Putin were saying very similar things. Joe Biden initially came out very hawkish, but eventually mellowed over the course of the last 5 minutes or so. And if you listen to what Putin was saying, it sounded something very similar to what Joe Biden was saying. The media was going after Joe Biden in this. Hey, did you tell Putin this? Hey, did you tell Putin that? Hey, did you make this point very clear? The media was doing that. They were the howler monkeys. They were the ones. They were pushing and edging. The president wanted to go further and further. They asked Donald Trump about sanctions. This is what Trump said about, hey, are you going to pass sanctions on people? Because, you know, you didn't really get anything out of this telephone call. Are you gonna do that? Are you gonna do that? Are you gonna do that? And if so, why not? This is Trump's response.
Why haven't you increased the sanctions on Russia yet?
Well, because I think there's a chance of getting something done. And if you do that, you can also make it much worse. But there could be a time when that's going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah. So Trump's thing is, well, look, I think we may be able to get a deal done. I don't know why he thinks that. Europe is not for it. Zelensky is not for it. Russia may be for it under certain conditions, but you're not going to give them the conditions. So Russia's not for it under conditions to which you're willing to give. So it sounds like you're the only person that's trying to do it for a campaign thing. But that's not enough. It's not enough. So we will see what that memorandum looks like. As I pointed out, Peskov pointed out, the memorandum is not going to be something that goes back pretty quickly. In fact, just to go into the article real quick, Peskov points out, he says, the Ukraine conflict should be a memorandum outlining the principles and timeline for a peaceful settlement. Peskov told reporters early on Tuesday that, quote, there is not and cannot be a deadline for finalizing such an agreement. So for Donald Trump saying, oh, we'll be doing this in 2 weeks. Dude, no, this is not the way diplomacy works. Nor does diplomacy work with fighting stopping. In many wars, Vietnam is a good example. Fighting kept going as they were negotiating. Why would they stop? Everyone understanding wants this to be done as quickly as possible, but certainly the devil is in the details, Peskov said. He noted that Moscow and Kiev would each draft their own version of a memorandum, after which both sides will face a difficult negotiations on agreed to a single text. So my question to you is there any room for commonality in regards to single text when Moscow draft their memorandum of this is what this needs to look like for a peace deal? Your people need to leave. You need to recognize our territory, meaning Istanbul plus the additional 4. What is Zelensky going to say? We're not giving up our territory. We're not doing that. We're not giving up our NATO aspirations. We're not doing that. That's not what's happening. You need to leave. You need to pay us reparations. Putin needs to jump off the Kremlin and die. Like, how do you meld two diametrically opposed points of view? And when that memorandum, both sides put it out, and it's clear that you can't meld them, what does Trump do? What does Trump do? What does Trump do? That's the fascinating part. If Trump decides to walk, does he walk and continue to give weapons and sanctions, or does he just walk? Okay, I don't think Zelensky's serious. I'm out. All of this is a confidence game for Trump. All of this diplomatic language that Putin is doing is to try to make Trump believe, hey, we're open to a deal, which they are. From Zelensky's part, the reason that he went, not because he wanted to go, he had to go. His master told him to do so. Europe and Kiev are terrified that Trump walks, which is the reason why they have been so adamant about pushing Trump. Hey, we need you to put sanctions. Hey, we need you to back our sanctions. Hey, we need you to do this, this, and this. What does Trump do? That's the question. That is a fascinating question I don't have an answer to. But at some point, it is going to become brimingly clear that there is no melding these two sides. That Ukraine is either going to have to get weaker on the battlefield, their military is going to have to collapse on the battlefield, Russia is going to have to go to Kiev. Something's going to have to happen. Maybe there's political turmoil when it becomes clear that this war is lost in real, brimingly clear terms because the military is collapsing. I don't know. But right now, as it stands, they're not at a place where they're willing to accept that they've lost. And the regime that's in power is not willing to give up the war. They want to keep going. They want to keep fighting. They want to keep grabbing people off the street, people at the barbershops, people walking their dogs. They want to keep doing that. And they want to keep throwing those people on the front lines, chum in the water. It's disgusting. But that's where we are. That's where we are. Don't mistake Putin's diplomatic language for him deviating from his position. He hasn't deviated. He hasn't changed. He hasn't moved one iota. What he is telling Trump is the same thing that they told. The fact that he said a quite frank discussion is political language. We said what we needed to say to each other about where our sides were. And when we realized that these sides were irreconcilable, he wasn't getting a ceasefire. We weren't getting what we wanted out of the deal. We decided to come for something else, which was a memorandum of understanding. It's that. That's what you got. That is what you got. I don't know where Arnaud is. Arnaud might not have been able to make it today, but we're going to move on. Yeah, we're going to move on. Yeah, we're going to move on. I've covered it. I wanted to get the take of what was taking place in Moscow itself. I've given you a breakdown. I've given you a breakdown of what was taking place. Later on in the show, we're going to have a conversation with Daniel Kovalik. In fact, I want to go to this, Iran. This has become a sticking point. This has become a sticking point. I have brought people on the show to have this conversation about Iran. And oftentimes, what you'll find that I will ask them, give me your take on this. And what a lot of people, military and otherwise, would give me is a rational argument. They would give me a rational take. They would say, well, this will be a catastrophe. This will be horrendous. We will be militarily defeated. What happens if they shoot our planes out the sky? What happens if Iran responds and kills all of our people in the, our military bases? We have like 50,000 people. These are vulnerabilities. What happens if they shut down the Strait of Hormuz? Oil will go through the roof. This will be a traumatic conflict, not just for the U.S. and Iran, but also for the globe. And because they go with the rational argument, they say, I can't believe that Trump would do this. So I don't believe Trump would do this. Okay. Are ideologues rational? Is it possible that they have a point of view that they can pull this off? And if they indeed have a point of view, mistaken as it may be, that they can pull this off, with that workable point of view, push them to behave that way, especially when Trump has effectively said, if you don't take my deal, I'm going to bomb you. All right? So Witkoff comes out and says this. And by the way, just to be very clear, what Witkoff is saying here is an escalation of his demands, and not just an escalation of his demands, something that he knows as a flat fact is a red line. Meaning, what Witkoff is saying here He's saying something that he knows Iran has already turned down and has already said, this is not even on the table for discussion. This is not up for grabs. The president has said as much. Ayatollah has said as much. Argachi, the foreign minister for Iran, has said as much. Everybody consistent within the context of the government has said the exact same thing. Enrichment is not on the table for discussion. We may lower the amount. That is fair game, but enrichment is not on the table, especially since Iran knows what I know, that this has nothing to do about nukes. This has nothing to do about nukes. Iran is not getting a nuke. They're not trying to get a nuke. Our own intelligence says they're not trying to get a nuke. And even if they were, that's their business. They're a sovereign nation. But they're not trying to. If they wanted to, they would have one by now. According to Netanyahu, 20 years ago, Iran was going to have a nuke in 5 minutes. Okay, well, that was 20 years ago. How many 5 minutes have been in 20 years ago? The point that I'm making here is the entire premise of this is based on a lie. For me, it sounds a lot like weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. So listen to what Wickoff says here, supposedly the realist. What he's saying here is off the table for discussion. And yet he's saying it nonetheless. And I'm pretty sure that Wickoff has told Trump that this was off the table for discussion. Iran has said multiple times this is off the table for discussion. And yet you have Wickoff going on TV saying this is the stated position of the US government.
Okay, and then we have the other major set of negotiations with Iran. Can you give us a sense of what is the outline of the deal that President Trump wants to get with Iran?
Well, the president has been very clear. He wants to solve this this conflict diplomatically and with dialogue. And he's given all the signals. He's directly sent letters to the supreme leader. I have been dispatched to deliver that message as well, and I've delivered it. But on the other hand, we have one very, very clear red line, and that is enrichment. We cannot allow even 1% of an enrichment capability. We've delivered a proposal to the Iranians that we think addresses some of this without disrespecting them.
You're disrespecting them by even bringing this up as a legitimate issue. Even when you hear them make this argument about, well, they can get it from somewhere else. Well, again, it doesn't matter. Iran has said that this is off the table. This is a red line for us. We're not going to do it. Now, all of the reporting that has come out that effectively is pointing out saying that Iran has canceled negotiations is false. Iranian media says it's false. The government says it's false. So I'm going to go with the notion that it's false. From their point of view, they're being very diplomatic because they're trying to show the world we are open to negotiations. We're being reasonable. We're being rational. The Trump administration is the one that's escalating their demands. The same Wickoff sitting here saying enrichment is off the table. In the very beginning, said 3.6 is okay. Now, enrichment is off the table. And not just enrichment. Trump went so far as to say, well, you need to also stop helping freedom fighters in the region, the axis of resistance in the region. Okay, so you've expanded beyond where you were in regards to the nuclear talks into now, we don't like the fact that you're also helping the quote-unquote Houthis or helping Ansar Allah, let's get it that way, or helping some of the other players in the region. We don't like that. So we also need to have that on the table. Okay, you're expanding what is on the table for discussion to things that Iran has already told you are not on the table for discussion. Okay, so now I'm stuck with this idea of, now what? You're at loggerheads. Iran said no, kick rocks. You're saying this is your red line. Okay, so both red lines are now being crossed. There's no way to mediate that. Both red lines are very clear. You also get this. The US has started moving armaments into the area of Diego Garcia. Come on, give me the title. US deploys F-15 fighters, jets to defend Indian Ocean outposts. Really? Is that what they're doing? They're defending the outposts? Defending it from who? Who are they defending it from? Who's attacking? Who's threatening the outposts? The media in the United States is trash. All of you people who write these articles are trash. Are you serious? Who is the U.S. defending Diego Garcia? Just like Netanyahu said, we're defending Israel by murdering 150,000 Palestinians. Okay. U.S. Air Force F-15 fighters have been deployed to Diego Garcia to protect its assets on the Indian Ocean, as has been reported. A U.S. official told Air and Space Force magazine that the aircraft has been sent to the island to provide force protection without specifying how many planes has been sent. Military magazine, The War Zone, stated that at least 4 of the aircraft have been sent to protect assets there, which include B-52H bombers. Okay. Why would you need B-52 bombers? And why would you need escorts or protections for those bombers? Unless those bombers may be going on a mission pretty soon. You also get this. Iran clearly believes something is up because they have started to show their teeth more and more. Iran puts out, right here, Iran's air defense has improved dramatically, top general says. Okay, why is he telling me that? Why are you telling me this? That's random, right? You also get this. This is Iran showing off their new intercontinental ballistic missile. Okay, again, why are you showing me this? Why are you showing me your missile cities? Why are you showing me this? This is them trying to make the point. If you do this, there will be consequences. Meaning both sides are signaling that the negotiations have hit loggerheads, have broken down. And what did it say? War is politics by other means. Okay, also force projection is politics by other means. Me trying to display what I can do, me showing you my teeth, me showing you my claws, is me trying to tell you, don't mess with me, don't do this. This is not going to work out well for you. And the US, of course, with the $1 trillion military, is under the mindset that we can do whatever the hell we want, apparently. So all of this talk about Trump trying to get peace seems to be nonsense, considering he's all over the place in what he wants in regards to his demands. And he's stuck with the things that he said before of, we're going to bomb you, we're going to bomb you, we're going to bomb you if you don't accept our deal, despite the fact that our deal keeps changing. What does that look like to you? Does it look like you come up with a deal under those terms? When he's moving military assets in the area, does it look like he's bluffing? Or does it look like he's fulfilling the obligations of what he said he was going to do prior? Do you honestly believe that Donald Trump cares about life and limb, considering the number of people he's been murdering in Yemen, and for that matter, considering the number of people he's been backing Netanyahu murdering in Gaza? One other point. There's been a rash of articles saying stuff like this recently. Again, we're coming to this again. Look at what he says. U.S. pressure Israel to end the war in Gaza after Donald Trump's visit to the Middle East. Here's another one. We will abandon you if the war continues, Trump tells Israel, according to WAPO, Washington Post. That's interesting, right? That all of these articles are now coming out again. We will abandon you. Or in other cases, there was an article that pointed out Donald Trump tells Netanyahu in a phone call to ensure that humanitarian aid gets to Gaza because he cares so much about the Gazans after all of this time where he's allowed the murder, killing, and burning children alive. Isn't it weird? Didn't we just go through this? Where you had all of these articles pointing out Trump rift, Netanyahu, Trump has a rift with Israel, Trump undermines Israel, et cetera, et cetera. And then all of those articles gave a segue to create distance between the US and Israel as Israel goes on a murder spree in order to take all of Gaza. Understand, it was impossible for them to do it without US weapons, bullets, and support. And all of those articles were coming out when a week before the US was standing before the ICJ arguing that Israel has a right to starve 2 million people. That's weird, right? So the last time they were putting out this and people were believing it for whatever odd particular reason, But the last time they put this out, it was done purely to allow Israel to do what it did in order to try to capture Gaza. And understand, Israelis' capture of Gaza is not separate from the U.S. plans for Gaza. So what do we think these articles now are coming out to imply? Is it because what they're thinking about is creating some kind of distance and separation if indeed Israel hits Iran, something that it can't do without U.S. support and without U.S. permission? What I'm getting at is, it's very interesting to me that all of these articles have started to come out saying there's some kind of split between the U.S. and Israel, and the U.S. is saying, we will abandon you if you don't do this, according to an anonymous source in the Washington Post. Okay. When you dig into it, because for whatever particular reason, people just read the headline, this is another article referring to that article in WAPO. Right here. Trump is letting people know we will abandon you if you do not end this war. The source was quoted as saying to the Washington Post. All right. Is it true, though? God damn it. All right. Come on. It's forcing me to open it. I'm sorry. Oh, there we are. Continue reading. Oh, dude. You're killing me, bro. You're killing me. Continue reading. All right. Who is this? Times of India. Your page sucks. Your page completely sucks. Okay. Times of India, in this piece, you just have to take my word for it, pointed out okay. So right here, Netanyahu currently has 67 seat majority. According to WAPO, Trump administration is pressuring Israel. However, U.S. Ambassador Mike Huckabee denied the report. He told Ynet News, quote, the reporting is nonsense. They need to listen to what the president says, not what some uninformed source pretends to know. Agreed. And to go further with that, it doesn't seem like somebody has told Rubio, because Rubio said responding to right here, Rubio confirms U.S. support for the expansion of Israel's war on Gaza. Where's the split? Where's the deviation? It seems like Trump is on board. Okay, well, what does Trump say about it? Well, when you ask Trump about it, Trump says this. And understand, Trump is saying this for political reasons. And I'm going to explain those political reasons after I show the clip. But I want you to listen very closely to what Trump says here. It's important.
Are you frustrated at all with Prime Minister Netanyahu?
No, look, he's got a tough situation. You have to remember there was an October 7th that everyone forgets. It was one of the most violent days in the history of the world, not the Middle East.
Most violent days in the history of the world. This includes Operation Barbarossa. This includes the 150,000 people that Netanyahu has effectively slaughtered. This includes Nazis. I mean, this includes everything. Most violent day in the world. Sure, Trump. Sure.
The world, when you look at the tapes, and the tapes are there for everyone to see. So he has that problem. That problem should have never happened. Now, if I were president, that problem wouldn't have happened because Iran had no money. They were stone cold broke.
Right. So he's blaming Iran for something that Hamas did, despite the fact that Iran didn't get involved after Hamas did what it did. Maybe that would make sense if you had a situation where Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthis, or let's say Ansar Allah, and Iran hit Israel at once. Okay, well, maybe you would have a point. Iran stayed out of it and made it perfectly clear we had nothing to do with this. And yet, once again, he's blaming Iran. So people who are putting this trash out that there's some kind of split between Donald Trump and Netanyahu, that Trump is pressuring Netanyahu to give humanitarian aid. Trump is saying we would abandon you. You're lying. You're out of your mind. You got some random anonymous source that gave you some chum so you can make headlines that you are effectively running with. What I suspect is to give cover for some attack that may take place on Iran. I could be wrong. I don't know if that's a flat fact. I'm just saying in the same way that that chum was put into the water to give cover for Israel to do what it did, with the U.S. standing there like, oh, this is, I can't believe Israel is doing this. Here's more guns, here's more bullets, here's more weapons, here's more money. If the US was serious, they would just stop the money. They would stop the weapons. That's how you stop your proxy from murdering and killing hundreds of thousands of human beings. That's not what's happening. So there is no split between the US position and Israel's position. To make this even worse, Donald Trump, and I believe I called him a degenerate in this clip, what he's saying in this clip needs to be understood.
To me,
Needs to be broken down, and I will do so. This is Trump in the same interview talking about the starving, murdered, maligned Gazans.
I think Iran is right now the big problem. That's also a problem. Hamas is big, and we want to take care of the people. Look, people are starving. You see what's going on right now. People are starving. One of the things that one of the three great leaders that I saw 2 nights ago said to me, please help the people, the Palestinians. I said, other than the obvious, what do you mean by that? He said, they're starving. And he meant it with his heart. They're starving. So I've already started working on that. It's a deep problem, but we'll get it solved. And a very immediate and a very big problem is, I'm so proud of what we were able to do with India and with Pakistan. Well, it's a potential problem like that we have here.
Just think of what he's saying here for the moment. Just really consider what he's saying. Donald Trump and Joe Biden before him is given 70 to 80% of all the money and bullets and guns and bunker buster bombs that Israel is using. Israel is nothing without the US support for Israel. It wouldn't exist. Israel wouldn't be able to carry on the massacres that it's been carrying on if it wasn't for the bombs and the bullets and the guns that the United States was providing it. Meaning, this doesn't happen without US support. This doesn't happen without US support. None of that happens. The starving doesn't happen without US support. So Donald Trump is sitting there effectively saying, it's a tough problem. I don't know what it's a tough problem. The people are starving. Man, it's really difficult. It's a puzzle. Whew. That's a toughie. I don't know how we're going to have to deal with that, but I'm going to have to deal with it like India and Pakistan. Okay, well, India and Pakistan are not your proxies. You're not giving India and Pakistan 80% of the money, weapons, the bullets, the bombs in order to do what they do. You're not giving them diplomatic support. You're doing that for Israel. You stop the money, you stop the guns, you stop the bullets, you stop the bombs, Israel stops. Trump knows that. But he sits there and lies in that interview. And do you think that the interviewer is going to point out, well, sir, you're putting 80% into Israel to allow that starvation? Of course, he's not going to say it. He's never going to say it. Nobody is ever going to say it to him. And so he gets to sit there and say that. Now, understand why he's saying it, though. He's saying it because what Israel wants to do is effectively force march all of the Palestinians in Gaza to a pen, to basically a concentration camp. And in the concentration camp, have U.S. companies and whatnot come in to take over humanitarian services, effectively turning it into a profit-making enterprise. But on top of that, to make a justification and rationale using the pain, the injury, the malignment that he is causing to create a justification to say we need to ship them out to somewhere else. We need to send them to Libya. We need to send them maybe to Syria. We just need to get them out of Gaza because Gaza is a horrible place to be in. This idea that Trump is not working arm in arm with Netanyahu is nonsense. And this idea that somehow Trump and the deviation with Trump may create a different outcome for Iran is also nonsense. I'm trying to point out that these things on some level are related to one another. The US is not a threat. It's not threatened by Iran. Israel is. Trump's motivation for going after Iran has everything to do with Israel. It's nothing to do with Iran by itself, or Iran is a threat to the United States. In the same way that he's going after Iran for Israel, he is also allowing this for Israel. There's no deviation from Donald Trump's strategy, plan, than that of Israel. When Marco Rubio makes the point of saying, no, Donald Trump is for the war in Gaza, he is. When Trump tells you, no, there's no deviation between me and Bibi, there isn't. Maybe he dislikes him, but that's not going to affect policy or change anything that he's doing in regards to that policy. So these articles that people are putting out, where they read a headline and they ran with the headline, Trump is forcing Netanyahu to do this or that. Trump said, I would abandon you if you don't end the war. Nonsense. It's all nonsense. It's all nonsense. But you have people who are still out there saying it, repeating it, as if it's somehow legit. It is not. It is not. Where are my guests? Hold on, let me check. See what's going on. Give me 1 second, guys. I just want to make sure. Today is Tuesday. It's now 8:15. So where on earth is my guess? Yeah, it's wild. People are still repeating it. They're still running around with this idea that Donald Trump somehow cares, or Donald Trump is somehow working to the betterment, or Donald Trump. I'm sorry, he's not. He's not. It's a scam. I don't know what's going to happen with Iran. I don't know if Trump is going to accept the 3.6% and then try to sell it as a new JCPOA that he got something out of it. I have no idea. I don't know if that's what's going to happen. I don't know if that's what he's going to do. Maybe all of these things are threats. Maybe all of these things are massive bluff. It doesn't look like it. And whether he is involved in some attack, whether Israel is involved in some attack, I don't know. I'm just pointing out that the people who are taking this rational argument, the rational argument is not, common sense is not common. Just because something is rational doesn't mean that the person is going to necessarily take that pathway, especially when you have all of these people who are around Trump. And it seems like what Netanyahu has decided is this is the moment. This is where we get everything that we're supposed to get. This is the president that we're going to use to get this stuff. So yeah, we're going to take all of Gaza. We're going to go after the West Bank. We're going to take parts of Syria. We're going to attack Lebanon. We're going to get our guy in Syria that's going to deal with Hezbollah and whatnot. We're going to do all of these things. And we're going to expel or murder the Gazans. That's what they've decided. And they have a president that's going to allow them to do it. So don't believe these headlines. Unless, you see something where it's like Trump stops the weapons, Trump stops the money, then you may be able to believe it. But until you see that, this degenerate is every bit as worse or every bit as bad as Joe Biden and every bit as assiduous to Israel as the former administration was on this topic and on this issue. Don't believe it. Don't believe it. And speaking of Joe Biden, that's becoming more of an issue. I got to be honest, I don't know where my guest is. This is bizarre. Usually, these guys are rock solid. But for whatever reason, not so much today. Oh, I see what's going on. Give me 1 second, guys. No, it was sent. Give me 1 second, 1 second. I thought that because I was using yeah, they got the links. Yeah, I don't get it. I don't know what's going on. You can't do anything about it. Show must go on. So I'm going to go to Joe Biden. The Joe Biden thing, and by the way, just to be very clear, this is what they've allowed. This is what Joe Biden has allowed. This is what Donald Trump has allowed. This is what they paid for. This is what they paid for. So when I am being brutal to Joe Biden, when I'm saying stuff like God got involved or karma is hit, don't ask me for my empathy. I save my empathy for those people who are living in those conditions that these presidents paid for and litigated for. Donald Trump went after the ICC director who was going after Netanyahu, who makes it very clear that the ICC was a political institution that wasn't designed to go after the vagaries of the Western governments. It was only designed to go after people that the Western governments didn't particularly like. As you all know, at this point, Biden has cancer. His body is riddled with cancer. Now, this has turned into a scandal, to put it mildly. And the reason it turned into a scandal, and by the way, just be very clear, Joe Biden told us he had cancer a while ago. Now, people could say it was a gaffe, but in retrospect, considering what we know now, is it really a gaffe? Is this really a gaffe? Listen to the entire commentary that Joe Biden makes here. Is this really a gaffe?
The first frost, and because it was a 4-lane highway that was accessible, my mother drove us, and rather than us be able to walk. And guess what? The first frost, you know what was happening? You had to put on your windshield wipers to get literally the oil slick off the window. That's why I and so damn many other people I grew up have cancer, and why can't for the longest time Delaware had the highest cancer rate in the nation. And because it was a 4-lane.
Does that really sound like a gaffe to you? Honestly, it's coherent. There's no stutter in it. He said, that's why I and many people in Delaware have cancer. Okay. Can the president get radioactive or radiation treatments or chemotherapy as president? That's an interesting question, right? And can he do it in a way where nobody knows? Meaning, can Joe Biden get chemo if he knew he had cancer as president without the media finding out, without anybody else finding out that he was actually getting chemotherapy or radiation treatment? Okay, that's also an interesting question, because the fact that it's aggressive and it's moved to the bone, that's super interesting that it seems like it just wasn't treated. Now, if you're president of the United States and you know you have cancer, do you get it treated, or do you remain president of the United States without anyone knowing that you have cancer? Especially if you want to run again for another term. Interesting, right? My grandfather had prostate cancer, and if I'm not mistaken, his also migrated to the bone. He knew early that he had cancer in order to try to get treatment. My uncles had prostate cancer, and they started treating it immediately before it even started to show in the x-rays. I hope you understand my point. Like, meaning they were able to find it even before it made an appearance, because the diagnostics have gotten that precise. Now, Joe Biden was supposedly getting checkups routine checkups as president. And you're telling me that they got the worst doctor in the history of doctors at the White House to look after supposedly the most important man in the US, the president of the United States? That's a hard thing for me to believe. It's a hard thing for me to believe. J.D. Vance said the quiet part out loud. When J.D. Vance was asked about this, he didn't hold back. He didn't try to cover. He just said exactly what he thought about it. And I got to be honest, in this case, I think Vance may be right. This is him on the air.
President,
I don't know what,
I don't think
guess Air Force 2 or whatever.
Speaking of Joe Biden, sir, do you have any thoughts on his diagnosis?
Yeah, look, I mean, first of all, of course, we wish the best for the former president's health. And, you know, it sounds pretty serious, but hopefully he makes the right recovery. Like, I will say, whether the right time to have this conversation is now or at some point in the future, we really do need to be honest about whether the former president was capable of doing the job. And that's no, you know, that you can separate the desire for him to have the right health outcome with the recognition that whether it was doctors or whether there were staffers around the former president, I don't think he was able to do a good job for the American people. And that's not politics. That's not because I disagreed with him on policy. That's because I don't think that he was in good enough health. In some ways, I blame him less than I blame the people around him. And why didn't the American people have a better sense of his health picture? Why didn't the American people have more accurate information about what he was actually dealing with? This is serious stuff. And this is the guy who carries around the nuclear football for the world's largest nuclear arsenal. This is not child's play. And we can pray for good health, but also recognize that if you're not in good enough health to do the job, you shouldn't be doing the job.
Yes. Everything. No lies detected. Not a single lie in that statement is detected. And that was something that I pointed out myself. The presidency is not, you know, weekend at Bernie's. At any particular time of the night, for any particular occasion, even the energy to push through policy proposals, like the ability to be able to go from place to place to place to place in order to be forceful in what you're trying to advance as a president requires energy. I'm telling you, as I get older, my energy level decreases. It makes you more grumpy, right? Because now you have to force yourself to do more stuff in a way that you couldn't necessarily, or that you didn't necessarily have to push yourself to do before. Okay, well, what does it look like when you have a body riddled with cancer and you're clearly showing cognitive dementia and damage? How do you advance your agenda? That's assuming you have an agenda. How do you go from state to state to state to push through what you want as a president of the United States? How do you deal with world leaders in order to even affect your agenda in the context of world leaders? How do you do the job? And information is coming out now saying that Joe Biden had multiple camera angles in order to hide the fact that he wasn't altogether there, that they were insulated in order to, again, hide the fact that he wasn't altogether there, that he didn't even recognize George Clooney at the event that George Clooney was giving him $25 million. You saw him at the debate, and George Clooney pointed out, the guy at the debate is the same guy that I saw at that awards ceremony. You've seen him yourself. The media said these were deep fakes. The media effectively tried to hide the fact that Joe Biden was out of his mind. And even to the point where Joe Biden wanted to run again. So Donald Trump is asked about this. And Trump, being Trump, has no issue saying quiet part out loud. This is Trump's response.
Including cognitive tests, I'm proud to. I think it's very sad, actually. I'm surprised that it wasn't, you know, the public wasn't notified a long time ago, because to get to stage 9, that's a long time. I just had my physical. You saw that. You saw the results of that particular test. I think that test is standard to pretty much anybody getting a physical, good physical. We had the doctors at the White House and over at Walter Reed, which is a fantastic hospital. I do it. I did a very complete physical, including cognitive tests. I'm proud to announce I aced it. Got them all. I got them all right. You proud of me? Yes. Your husband would be proud of me for getting them all right. It's a little risk. If I didn't get them all right, these people would be after me. It would be not a good situation. But I think, frankly, anybody running for president should take a cognitive test. They say it's unconstitutional, but
Okay, Trump is talking about a cognitive test. I don't know what stage 9 cancer is. I don't even know if cancer has a stage 9 at all. So I have no idea what he's talking about with stage 9 stuff. I can tell you from personal experience from my own family, though, PSA tests picks it up. And those tests can pick it up even before it gets to the point of going to the bone. Meaning, Joe Biden had cancer for a while. This is not something that, oh my God, we just found out. Yes, it's not that. It's not that. They can say it all they want. It's not that. Joe Biden had cancer for a while. And what I strongly suspect, and I said this, by the way, several years ago when he was running, if you remember, nobody believed that Kamala Harris could win. Nobody believed it. Everybody thought that Joe Biden had the strongest chance of winning in the race. Now, that was before the debate. But they didn't believe she could win. When Joe Biden did the debate, all of a sudden it flipped and it became, well, of course she can win. Of course she's the better candidate. Of course. But think back for yourself. Before that debate, who was considered the stronger candidate? Joe Biden or Kamala Harris? And it's very possible that what they wanted, and I'm just going to repeat what I said 2 years ago, they don't believe Harris can win. They know Joe Biden is out of his mind. And what they want to do is wedge her. I think that was even the term I used, wedge her into the White House, where the American public doesn't get a choice. Effectively, a bait and switch. Yeah, Joe Biden is going to run, but Harris is effectively going to take over when Joe Biden gets in office, or Joe Biden is just going to say, okay, I'm out. I'm done. By the way, I got cancer. Harris takes it. Harris becomes the first Black woman president of the United States of America. Not because she was voted in, but because Democrats forced her in. Now, think of how many elections the Democrats have done this with. They did this with Sanders, where they effectively cheated in order to get Hillary Clinton over the finish line, who effectively lost Donald Trump. They didn't even have a primary in real terms. They had a de facto primary, but it wasn't a real primary, where Joe Biden just chose Harris. And then all of them came up with the argument, well, she was the people's choice. No, she wasn't. She was chosen. The public didn't choose her. She was the choice of the Democratic Party at that point. Hakeem Jeffries and the Democratic Party have started to take this tack. Listen to what Jeffries says here. He's making the argument that because Biden has cancer, that we shouldn't really be talking about this stuff now. We should just...
There are Republicans who are peddling conspiracy theory. It's my expectation that President Biden is going to meet this moment with the courage and resilience that he's consistently shown. Seems to me entirely inappropriate that at this moment in time, when President Biden is dealing with a serious and aggressive form of cancer, there are Republicans who are peddling conspiracy theories and want us to look backward at a time when they actually are taking health care away from the American people. No, as House Democrats, we're going to look forward. They literally are trying to take health care away from millions of Americans at this very moment in the dead of night. And Republicans want to fan the flames of conspiracy theories at this moment? No, thank you.
That's their response. That's their response. That is actually their response. That Republicans are flaming conspiracy theories. I suppose the conspiracy theory being Joe Biden had cancer. He knew he had cancer. He didn't disclose it to the American public. We have no idea how long he knew he had cancer, but obviously it's an aggressive form of cancer. And obviously it is intruding in the bone at this point. That the doctors that were working on Joe Biden at no point picked it up, at no point told him that he had cancer. And that out of the blue, when the Robert Hur takes came out that talked about the cognitive damage that Joe Biden was effectively suffering with, that now Republicans are making a conspiracy theory because they're asking the rational question of, when did you know that you had it? Meaning, how long did you know that you had cancer? Did you have it as president? And why didn't you disclose that to the American public? if you knew you had cancer as president of the United States? If they wanted the first Black woman president, Joe Biden could have stepped down, especially when he knew he had cancer. He chose not to do that, and chose not to do it, wedged Kamala Harris in, and to make it even worse, made sure that she didn't deviate from his positions on various issues. So she had to effectively run as Joe Biden in a dress, who was already massively unpopular. Republicans are trying to destroy Medicaid. They are destroying Social Security. They're doing those things. What does that have to do with accountability for the Democratic Party, who A, had a president that effectively lied about having a degenerative disease, cancer, B, lied about cognitive health, which was obvious for anybody to see going back for years at this point. And now they're making this argument that we shouldn't talk about those things. Those aren't things we should discuss. We should just look forward. Look forward to what? What do you think people are looking forward to? You're not offering anything for people, and you're trying to skirt the accountability associated with the fact that you effectively lied on a massive effing level to the American public. It's a cover-up. It's a scandal. It should be a scandal. They're not wrong for asking the question of, when did you know that you had cancer? Why didn't you disclose this to the American public? Don't you think that this is something that the American public should know, that the president had a degenerative disease as he was president of the United States with all of these immaculate responsibilities associated with the office? No, Jeffrey's point is we shouldn't talk about that stuff. We should just move on. Shouldn't pay attention to it. Pay no mind to it. There is no spoon. Just move on. Jeffries is out of his mind. There's a reason that if you look at the polling right now, that Democrats are still less than Trump in regards to the polling. There's a reason that they're at, 27%, 26% approval rating. That reason has a lot to do with the fact that you've lied to the American public. It has a lot to do with the fact of your position on the issue of Gaza. To be frank, you have 6 million people who didn't show up because of that issue. And it has a lot to do with the fact that you don't offer anything. What are they offering? For all intents and purposes, whatever Republicans are doing, Democrats just mosey along, almost like a finger in the dam. It seems that that's what they think their responsibility is. It has nothing to do with actual policy to get anything accomplished or to even change anything that the Republicans are doing. So yeah, they're doing a cash grab. They're going to destroy Medicaid, or at the very least take $1 trillion out of Medicaid. They're going to raise the deficit by $5 trillion. In fact, I don't even know why that's conjecture at this point. It is obvious that that's what they're going to do. For all of this talk about tariffs, do you realize that billions, I think it says something like $80 billion, Trump cost the American taxpayer because of the tariffs that the Trump administration went with and the last time that Donald Trump was in office. $80 billion. And the tariffs this time around will also cost Americans a ton of money that we are effectively going to have to pay out of our pockets. But to make it even worse, the tax cuts that they are talking about, they're going to cost. Tax cuts aren't free. Tax cuts cost money. Somebody has to pay for those tax cuts. And what they're going to end up doing is effectively putting that cost on us. They are going to destroy our social services in order to give themselves more and more cash. There's a leaked audio where one of these Republicans are talking about it, and they bring up the fact that this is indeed going to cost a ton of money. I'm trying to find the audio clip. I hadn't planned on playing it, but I'll play it now since. Hey, is this going to add anything to the deficit? Mind you, they're trying to increase the debt limit. So as she's saying this, just remember, they're trying to increase the debt
Just
limit.
a quick follow-up. Is the president okay with this bill adding to the deficit?
This bill does not add to the deficit. In fact, according to the Council of Economic Advisors,
Right.
this bill will save $1.6 trillion. And
just a quick follow-up. Is the president okay with this bill adding to the deficit?
this bill does not add to the deficit. In fact, according to the Council of Economic Advisors, this bill will save $1.6 trillion. And the president absolutely understands and hears the concerns of fiscal conservatives and of Americans who want to get our fiscal house in order. That's what the intention of this bill is.
Okay, let's go to reality. Let's go to reality for a bit. This is Ron Johnson in a leaked audio. Listen to what he says here.
If you really look at it, look at the numbers, and I look at the numbers, we will actually increase the deficit over the next 10 years, going from right now $37 trillion in debt. CBO says we'll be at 59. My guess we'd probably increase that by about $4 trillion with the big new deal, or the big beautiful bill. That puts us at 62 to 63 trillion dollars. Again, you have to be honest. And by the way, I know Buck at the end of the show, or I think he might have asked me this last time, well, what are you going to cut? It's impossible to say, Medicaid, absolutely have to go after that. But what you need is a process. If you really look at it, look at the numbers, and I look at the numbers, we will actually increase.
That's the truth. That's the truth. We will increase the deficit by $5 trillion. $5 trillion. Now, currently, we're at $36 trillion in debt. So we're talking about, what, $41 trillion? And it will be more than that over the course of time, because it's not like they're cutting the deficit from, as it goes from year to year to year. Joe Biden was spending, what, $2 trillion a year? Republicans have been spending around the same amount. So you're talking about $41 trillion under the Trump administration when they passed their big, beautiful deal over the course of I don't know how many years. That's astonishing. That's astonishing. Now, they're not talking about cutting military. Trump is saying he wants to increase military spending to $1 trillion a year. They're talking about cutting social services, Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, or at the very least Medicaid. They're talking about taking $1 trillion out of Medicaid. Now, the catch becomes, okay, what else are you going to take something from? Well, there's not much you can take anything from. What you're going to end up doing is increasing the debt limit. Hell, you may even get rid of the debt ceiling under the Trump administration, in which case you can pile as much debt on as you want. And as you pile that debt on, of course, they're not giving it back to us. They're giving it to themselves. They're giving it to themselves. Trump's big, beautiful bill and his propagandists in chief out there lying, saying it's not going to add anything to the deficit. It's flat out. It's not going to add anything to the deficit. Deficit's going to be fine. Deficit's going to be fine. Not going to add anything at all. Nothing at all. Just astonishing. I hope, look, I'm saying this because I'm trying. I don't know if anybody watches this that is MAGA, that is part of that clique that really believes in Trump. What is not going to be in it? I think I have this clip up too. What did Trump say he was going to do as president? What did he say he was going to do in his big, beautiful bill? Do you remember? Think back. I've spoken about it because I said if Donald Trump does this, he's going to destroy the Democratic Party for a generation. I said that because it would be true. No tax on tips, no tax on Social Security. That should be a plan the Democrats came up with. Hey, we're going to eliminate taxes on people who have service jobs because service jobs are the predominant jobs at this point. And if you're a waiter, a waitress, if you're doing YouTube, if you're doing something where you're getting tips, we're not going to tax those tips. We're going to make that as a tax cut for you, the American public. That's what we're going to do for you. My name is Donald Trump. That's what I believe in. No tax on tips. And if you remember when Kamala Harris came out with it and said, well, I'm going to do no tax on tips. Donald Trump, she's stealing my plan. She's stealing my idea. How dare she steal my idea? That was my plan first. I'm the one who said no tax on tips. That was my plan. That was my agenda. You know what is not in this bill? No tax on tips. No tax on tips. This is Trump talking about his big, beautiful bill. And again, notice what he does not say in this clip. No tax on tips.
In history with 100% expense, which is something that people cannot believe they're getting. We did it in the last one, and we had the most successful economy in my first 4 years that we've ever had, the history of our country. And expensing was one of the things that led to that. But it's 100% expensing for companies investing in America and increasing take-home pay for the typical family by thousands of dollars a year. And to show you how middle income this is, there'll be no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax for the great seniors in Social Security. So you have no tax on Social Security for our great seniors. And we have full deduction for interest. If you buy a car that's made in America, you get an interest rate deduction. That's going to be it's got to be made in America.
Clear. Trump was saying this 2 weeks ago. He was saying this 2 weeks ago. This was 2 weeks ago. None of these things are in the bill. None of these things are in the bill. Just 2 weeks ago, that's what he was pointing out. No tax on tips, no tax on Social Security. All of these things, we're going to give the middle classes massive tax. None of those things are in the bill. I watched the bill get passed to go through the committee. None of those things are in the bill. None of them. Now, let's be very clear. All of those things would have added massive amounts of money to the debt. But either way you look at it, they're not in the bill. So he's hung MAGA out to dry on one of the main priorities. That whatever you think about Steve Bannon, and even on some level J.D. Vance, every blue moon, they say stuff in coordination with workers, meaning that plan might have been something that Vance would have been okay with and supported. Trump used that campaign rhetoric the entire way through. It puts you in the mind of Joe Biden saying, I'm going to increase the minimum wage $15 an hour. $15 an hour. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to increase the minimum wage $15 an hour. He gets in office and immediately up in smoke. He just did the same thing to MAGA. He just did the same thing to MAGA. The same thing is true on Iran. The same thing is true on the war in Yemen. The same thing is true on ending the war in Russia. He could have just walked the F away in the way that Steve Bannon says. Now, he may have given you a dog and pony show in regards to throwing out people who are criticizing Israel. But is Israel first really what he ran on? Or did he ran on America first? I'm trying to make the point to MAGA that you have been betrayed, that all things being equal, the things that you voted for are not part of it. Now, you could say you believe in strongman Trump. Okay, fair enough, you believe in strongman Trump. But are you believing in Trump for what he said he was going to do? Or are you believing in Trump just because he's Trump? Those are very different things. If you say, well, I believed in him because I thought he was actually going to do no tax on tips. I'm a waiter. I work for a living as a waiter. I make tips. Tips are my main thing. I would love the fact if he gives me no tax on tips because I would only have to give $12,000 from the standpoint of government. The rest of the money would be tips. That would be a huge tax cut for me as a middle class worker in this country. Okay, you've just gotten screwed. You've just gotten screwed. If you have a mom that's on Social Security, or if you yourself are on Social Security and you say, well, God, man, I don't want to have to pay taxes on Social Security. It's little as it is. I only make $1,200. I only make $1,400 from Social Security. I don't want to have to pay taxes on the tips or on Social Security itself. That eats into the small wages that I get. So yeah, I'm voting for, okay, you just gotten screwed. Also, he is giving his cronies a massive effing tax cut. And you have just gotten hung out to dry. 2 weeks ago, he was still saying it. And just to be very clear, Joe Biden, if you remember when Joe Biden got in office, Joe Biden was also still talking about $15 an hour minimum wage. They were also using budget reconciliation. They were also trying to pass it using budget reconciliation. And when it didn't pass the first time around, Joe Biden was like, oh well, guess can't get it. Sorry. Got rid of it. Now Trump, pulling a Joe Biden, has just done the exact same thing. His big, beautiful bill is ultimately hung the elderly, people who need Medicaid, or for that matter, people who earn a middle-class wage, that's assuming it's a middle-class wage, and a service job. He's hung you all out to dry. He's hung you all out to dry. Just amazing. I get it. People want to believe in something, and they want to believe that there's some key difference between the political entities of the parties. But if you think about it, they function the same way. Here are all these promises that we make. Here are all the things that I'm going to do. I'm going to end the war in 24 hours. I'm going to be a peace candidate, not a war candidate. I'm going to fight for America first. And you come in, and what do? You bastardize the First Amendment by chucking people out of the country when they criticize Israel, a foreign entity, by the way. You go after institutions who criticize Israel, a foreign institution, by the way, meaning you are attacking one of the vestiges that America should be proud of, a First Amendment, on behalf of a foreign nation. That is astonishing. You would think that MAGA would say, hey, that's outrageous. How are you doing that? How are you doing all of this for this foreign country, as opposed to an America First agenda? That doesn't seem like America First. It seems like Israel first. And yet, he doesn't. And the catch becomes, okay, does MAGA stick by him for it? And even with the immigration thing, Barack Obama kicked 3 million people out of the country. I guarantee you Trump is not going to come close to that number. Not going to come close, not going to be anywhere near it. And yet, you still are probably going to get cultists in MAGA that continue to back him. You've been had. You've been betrayed. Every bit as much as Black folks voting for Obama. I don't know if there were any Biden people. I suspect that people voted for Biden just because they wanted to not get Trump. But on the few things that Joe Biden promised, this notion of expanding Affordable Care Act, this idea of legalizing marijuana, the $15 an hour minimum wage, the child tax credit. Well, it wasn't even a tax credit, it was a stipend for kids. All those things were lies. All of them. Joe Biden did the thing for like a year, giving money to kids, and all of a sudden, up in smoke, because Democrats didn't necessarily back it. $15 an hour, up in smoke. Just like $15 an hour, or just like no tax on tips. Sounds nice. Didn't get it. No tax on seniors. Sounds nice. Didn't get it. Stopping the wars. Sounds nice. Didn't get it. At what point do you wake up and recognize that these people are not working out for your interests? That the benefits, the tax cuts that he's about to give the rich, and the debt that he's going to put on our backs in regards to putting it on the deficit as he gives those tax cuts to the rich, are not in our interests. That these people are supposed to be fiscally responsible, the fiscally responsible party of the Republican Party, that are now adding trillions of dollars of debt in order to give tax cuts, that's not in your interests. When will MAGA wake up and realize that they were sold a bill of goods? And will they wake up and recognize that they were sold a bill of goods? That is the more interesting question to me. I told you before, I think liberals and MAGA are in cults. I think both of them are. In the same way that they would turn around and say, well, Joe Biden is sharp as a tack. Joe Biden is hard sex with Joe Biden 3 times a week. So he's clearly, he's on it. When he's in his meetings, he's like, pew, pew. He just knows that stuff. And that stuff is, no. Come to find out those meetings were scripted. There's that. Joe Biden was hidden. There's that. And do you honestly believe that Donald Trump knows anything about the world? Anything about foreign countries? Anything about the politics of those countries? Or do you think Donald Trump is a vessel in which things are dumped into him and he goes out as an actor and just repeats it? It's that one. I think it's that one. I'm sorry. You've been sold a bill of goods. You've been sold a bill of goods. I want to move to another story, since apparently my guests have betrayed me today and decided that they were not showing up. I don't know what the hell is going on. Dan Kovalik got his message with no issue. Arnaud was supposed to be on the show. Also, Daniel Lazare was supposed to be on the show. Both flaked out. That sucks. I know these stories myself because I have to know the stories. But I know the stories in the context of talking to my guests. I can explain the stuff. I can go through the stuff. But people don't necessarily watch to hear me explain it and go through it. They come to the show to hear interviews with people who are also subject matter experts. It's what it is. You do what you got. So I want to go to another clip. This is Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is fascinating. In many respects, one of the things that people who back Sanders, like myself, to the hilt, in fact, he was the one that radicalized me and got me into doing a channel, I would argue. When Sanders was cheated and Jerry Beck took him to court, they said we can lie, cheat, and steal in a smoke-filled room. Sanders, however, would never touch it, if you've noticed. Like, he would never say anything about the fact that he was cheated. When he would go out and say, I want you to go vote for Hillary Clinton, and they would boom for a full minute, he still would never say the Democratic Party cheated me, that I had been had, that for all intents and purposes, it was an unfair race that I ran in, that Hillary Clinton had absolute control of space, matter, and time in regards to the DNC. When I ran in, he would never say it. He would never touch it. And it was one of the most infuriating things to people like me and the people who effectively backed Sanders, was giving money to his campaign because they wanted him to effectively win. Apparently, he has let the cat out the bag in an interview, and I'm going to play part of this because I'm just fascinated by the fact that it took him all this time to say something about it. This is Sanders. This is what he says.
We felt that over the last 4 elections, Democrats, we felt that we didn't have a say on who could be president. We talk a lot about the Republicans being autocrats and oligarchs and taking over democracy, but from the Democrat perspective, and I'm a lifelong Democrat, I felt like the Democratic Party completely removed the democratic process from its constituents. And I think they need to have some accountability of that.
No argument here.
I donated for you. I mean, I wanted you to, like, 2016, I was like, this is going to happen. This guy's going to do it. And it felt like they stole it from me. And I'll be honest, it broke my heart when you supported it.
Yes. 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 Thank you. Yes. Somebody said it. Somebody said it. Somebody is sitting there with Bernie Sanders and has said what everybody who backed him and their mama thought, but nobody would say. It broke my heart when you turned around and backed a party that all of us knows cheated you. Now, the question becomes, what does Sanders say here? What does Sanders say? What comes out of Bernie Sanders' mouth in this moment? What does he say? Let's hear it. I'm excited by the fact that somebody sat there and said, it broke my heart when you turned around and supported the party that cheated you. And by the way, on something else, when Sanders put it out, the Democratic Party picked their candidates for 4 elections. And Sanders says, no argument. What does Bernie say? What does Bernie say? Let's hear him. I want to hear him.
Look, but you have, in the world that I live in, you got a choice. And I mean, a lot of people, including my wife, agree with you. But, you're down to a choice. Is it going to be Hillary Clinton or is it going to be Donald Trump? Not a great choice.
But it ended up being him anyway, so why don't we burn it down?
Well, because it's easy to say burning it down means that children are not going to have, food to eat, that the schools will deteriorate, people will not have health care.
I got it.
And I'm an elected official. I got
to... Bernie, you missed the point. You missed this point. She lost anyway. She lost anyway. And this is the same guy that went from pillar to post screaming for a political revolution. What does that mean? If not, on some level, we're willing to burn it down. If I need to run third party with my 20, 30,000 people that are back, then God damn it, that I'm willing to do that. If I need to use those people as leverage in order to get political concessions, then God damn it, I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to have a knife fight in a phone booth if I need to do that in order to win this election. She lost anyway. I'm going to let him finish. I'm just, I don't know what this guy is, but fucking A.
Represent the people.
That's fair.
And I can't turn my back on.
But then could we not also say, if ostensibly there hasn't been a fair primary for the Democrats since 2008, are they not also a threat to democracy? Yes. We often hear.
Fair enough. That is, yeah, I'm not going to argue with that.
saying, yep, I'm not going to argue with that. I'm not going to argue with that. I want to bring in my guests. Thankfully, I've got a guest, Dan Kovalik. Daniel Kovalik. Daniel, man, I have no idea what has transpired today. You are the only guest that showed up. I don't know what the hell happened today. I've had to carry the show on my own. I still had 500 and some people here, so God bless them for staying and listening to me. I just did segment after segment after segment after segment. But thank you for joining me, man. You doing okay?
I'm doing great. Always good to be with you. I'm glad to be here for you.
You're a bit staticky today. Said it one more time.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be here for you. Let me check my Wi-Fi. Am I still staticky?
Well, your picture is fine, but your voice is staticky. Guys, are you hearing him okay, or is this just me hearing him this way?
Let me do something.
Okay, this ain't like a robot. Looks like Masai would not be giving Jamal a break today. Mr. Riffley, I have no idea what's going on today. Usually,
is that any better?
A little bit better, but they're saying static. They're hearing it also. It's just, they say you sound like a robot.
Even now. Okay. I tried to improve my internet.
No, you're fine. Do this for me. Go back out and come back in for me and see if that helps.
I'll do it. Yeah, you got it.
What the hell? What the hell is happening today? What the hell is happening today? What the hell is happening today? I don't know what is taking place today. I swear to God, I don't. I swear to God, I don't. All right, let's see. All right, Dan,
How's
talk
that?
to me.
Hello.
Much
Hello.
better. Much better.
Okay, great.
Much better.
Okay, good to be here. Good
How you
to
doing,
be
man?
here.
You doing all right?
Always good to see you.
Daniel, I have no idea what took place today. All of my guests flicked out. Every last one of them, I have no idea what happened. But Daniel Kovalik, he's an American human rights, labor rights lawyer, political activist. He previously taught at International Human Rights at the University of Pittsburgh School of Law. Daniel, thank you for joining me, man.
Thank you. Good to be here.
I want to, there has been, have you noticed a lot of media saying stuff like, let me see if I can find it, right here, stuff like this, that Trump is pressuring Netanyahu. The U.S. pressured Israel to end the war in Gaza after Donald Trump's visit to the Middle East. Here's another one, a screaming headline from the Jerusalem Post. We will abandon you if the war continues, Trump tells Israel. Now they're pulling this from some random anonymous source from the Washington Post. I don't know if you know how I feel about anonymous sources. I don't think much about anonymous sources. I remember when Dick Cheney was an anonymous source for the Iraq War, and Dick Cheney would be an anonymous source, and then he would go on TV and reference the New York Times with nobody knowing that he was the anonymous source that he's referencing. So my belief, my take on anonymous sources, it's not much at all. For all I know, there's some spook that's putting out information in order to push the media in a particular direction, and the media runs with it. But because of the headline, it's a screaming headline. We will abandon you. Like, it's so loud that all of the media has been carrying that particular headline. Now, when they actually talk to somebody like Huckabee in the Trump administration, it's like, this is nonsense. He's like, I don't know who's peddling this nonsense. The only thing you need to do is ask the president himself. All right. So when you talk to the president, and this question comes up, hey, is there any daylight between you and Bibi Netanyahu? Like, people say that, that you two are not necessarily on the same page, but is it true? And of course, Donald Trump says, no, there's no daylight between us. Rubio comes out, no, there's no daylight between us. And I showed the clips and I showed the images prior, before you got here. Is it this one? Okay, no. I showed the clips before you got here, where Trump himself effectively says, no, there's no daylight. We're on the same page. And even as I keep pointing out to people, it would be impossible for Israel to carry out what they're doing without the U.S. supplying the bombs, the weapons, the guns, the bullets, the money, and everything else. Why do you think this reporting is coming out like this? It came out once before, and the reason it came out the last time was in order to create distance between the U.S. and Israel, while Israel carried out this kind of genocidal rampage that they've been doing for the last, up the ante over the last several weeks. Why do you think, though, that they're coming out with these headlines like that somebody put this chum in the water that the media is running with?
Well, because I think that the Trump administration and all the Western governments who also are saying, a number of other Western governments are saying similar things. If Israel doesn't stop this soon, we're going to have to step in. We can't support this. They know that what's happening is morally reprehensible. They know it looks terrible. They know their own populations find it reprehensible. So they're throwing people a bone. This is exactly what Biden did, for his entire term after October 7th. This is, once in a while he and or Kamala or someone else would say, oh, this is terrible. All these civilians are dying. That needs to stop. And yet the bombs and the munitions kept flowing. And we know now, by the way, that while Biden and Kamala would claim they were pushing very hard for a ceasefire, it turns out, as many of us suspected, that was never true. They weren't pushing for ceasefire, right? I think the same thing is happening now. Politically, the Trump administration, in turn, for the benefit of the American people, for the benefit of world opinion, has to look like they're doing something to stop this abomination that's happening in Gaza. But I think the reality, the truth, is the same truth as it was for the Biden administration. They really aren't trying to stop it, and they won't stop it, not unless something else intervenes to force their hand. And why do I say that? Because the death toll mounts every day. I mean, I saw a figure that between like March 18th and the present, something like 2,500 Palestinians have been killed, and that's the ones we know about. Again, there's, I'm sure, many more that died that we don't know about. The U.S. government is now estimating that within 48 hours, 14,000 Palestinian babies will die of famine if something isn't done. But nothing's being done. In fact, yesterday was it yesterday or the day before I woke up? I think yesterday. And I was excited because there was some news coming out. Okay, Israel's finally been forced to allow aid into Gaza.
5 trucks.
Well, what's that?
It was like 5
you
trucks.
saw 5
3 of which
trucks.
were
I saw 9 trucks, and 2 of the trucks were shrouds. We're bringing shrouds to wrap dead bodies in. Okay, this is a cruel joke. This is nothing, right? And by the way, if the U.S. really cared about the Palestinian people, what would prevent the U.S. from sending in ships, planes of aid right now to help people? Nothing.
Or telling them to stop the money. So,
Well,
hey,
and that's true too. But even if they, which they're not going to do, they're not going to stop the aid. I mean, the military assistance. But even aside from that, why aren't they, if they care about dead babies, why aren't they airlifting in formula? Why aren't they airlifting in food? They could do it if they really cared. They could say, they just had all these aircraft carriers in the Red Sea to fight Yemen. Why couldn't they bring those aircraft carriers in with aid and water? The fact is they don't care. They don't care.
I guess my point is, Daniel, we are giving them 80% of what they're doing. We are effectively paying to keep their economy afloat. You just tell them, let in the aid. Like, this is not like the notion that we have to fly in and do airlifts for
that's
proxy
true too,
that we're paying for is outrageous. Like when Joe Biden was like, we're going to build a bridge. Okay, why do you need to do that? Like the notion
Yeah,
that like you're
and
paying
of course,
all of
and no
no,
aid ever went across that bridge. That was a joke too. I mean, this is all theater. Everything
Yep.
they're saying about caring about the Palestinian people is just pure theater.
Yes.
So this is Trump talking about Netanyahu and whether or not there's a rift between the two.
Are you frustrated at all with Prime Minister Netanyahu?
No, look, he's got a tough situation. You have to remember there was an October 7th that everyone forgets. It was one of the most violent days in the history of the world, not the Middle East, the world. When you look at the tapes, and the tapes are there for everyone to see. So he has that problem. That problem should have never happened. Now, if I were president, that problem wouldn't have happened because Iran had no money. They were stone cold broke.
Are you frustrated at all with Prime Minister?
So from the horse's mouth, are you frustrated with Netanyahu? Nope. We're good.
Right.
We're good. We're good. And if you listen to Rubio, Rubio pointed out, hey, Trump supports what Netanyahu is doing. Right here. Rubio confirms, just so the audience will see, I don't want you thinking behind the ball. Cradle. This is Esteban Carrillo's outfit. Marco Rubio confirms U.S. supports expansion of the Israel war in Gaza. When asked during an interview with Margaret Brennan on CBS whether the U.S. supports expansion of Israel's war in Gaza, U.S. Secretary of State Rubio replied, "We expand the destruction of Hamas, that is ending of Hamas." So from their point of view, well, every baby that starves to death is effectively Hamas. So yeah, we support the expansion of the war on Gaza in this way. That's outrageous.
Yeah, well,
and one
the
last
other
clip,
thing
because
is,
I want to get
it's very
no, go ahead.
clear.
Now play the clip after.
Yeah, it's very clear that Netanyahu and Trump are on the same page about their original plan, which they told everyone about, complete with memes, of moving the Palestinian people out of Gaza. Now the plan is to bring 1 million Palestinians to Libya, right?
Yes.
So there's no daylight between Netanyahu and Trump. And again, to the extent they pretend there is, it's all theater to make people, again, to try to lull people into complacency, right? So they think, oh, okay, this is going to be solved. The Palestinians are going to be fed. War's going to end so we can go back to sleep.
Yep.
But you can't go back
This
to
is
sleep. Yeah.
no, please. I'm sorry. I am interrupting you, and I don't mean to. It's like a lag. I am totally sorry. Please continue. I'll
Yeah,
do
no,
better.
no. That's my thought. I mean, this is all, and the fact some people said, well, he went all the way to the Middle East. He didn't even visit Israel. This shows no. I mean, again, that was tactical. He was in Saudi Arabia making deals. It was a sleight of hand. Okay, you look at me here. Don't look at what is happening in Gaza. And that's what's going on. It's again the same thing Biden did. There's also no daylight between Trump and Biden or Kamala Harris on this. This is a bipartisan genocide. Let's be very clear about that. Even Bernie Sanders can barely muster condemnation for what's happening. Both parties are on board here.
Yeah. And part of that sleight of hand too was chum-like the same articles coming out. Trump threatens Netanyahu. Trump and Israel, have a rift, creating distance while Israel carries out that plan that Donald Trump and Israel had already agreed upon. We're going to put people in a concentration camp. We're going to use get all of these millions of people kicked out of the country. This kind of ethnic cleansing. Okay, so Trump goes to Saudi Arabia as Israel proceeds with the plan that they had already agreed upon, with the media saying, well, there's a rift between these two, as if Israel is doing this purely and entirely on their own. This stuff is just media management. And then he comes out and says this. I flipped out on this clip, like on Twitter. I think I called him a degenerate and all sorts of stuff. He says this, and I want to get your take on this too.
I think Iran is right now the big problem. That's also a problem. Hamas is big, and we want to take care of the people. Look, people are starving. You see what's going on right now. People are starving. One of the things that one of the three great leaders that I saw 2 nights ago said to me, please help the people
the Palestinians. I said, other than the obvious, what do you mean by that? He said, they're starving. And he meant it with his heart. They're starving. So I've already started working on that. It's a deep problem, but we'll get it solved. And a very immediate and a very big problem is, I'm so proud of what we were able to do with India and with Pakistan. Well, it's a potential problem like that we have here. I'll get it solved, and one way or the other, I'll get it solved. It's either going to be done nicely or it's going.
Give me a take on that. That clip set me off. That clip set me off like nobody's business. Give me a take on that clip.
Yeah, well, again, as we discussed, there's a number of ways the U.S. like this could solve that problem in Gaza if he really cared about people starving, and he doesn't, right? Again, I don't care what people say, especially politicians. I care what they do. And the actions speak louder than words here, and the actions are saying he is more than content to starve the people out so he can accomplish his goal and Netanyahu's goal of forcing them to leave Gaza. I mean, that's what's happening. And I don't know which three leaders he was talking about. I guess the Arabic leaders. Is that who he was talking about? Who, by the way,
probably.
those leaders.
Yeah.
And they're
No,
doing nothing. Let me say those Arabic leaders are doing nothing for Gaza either. Why aren't they feeding people in Gaza?
Mm-hmm.
Why
So
isn't
right.
Saudi Arabia, instead of giving billions of dollars to Donald Trump, why aren't they giving aid to Gaza? Why isn't Qatar, which gave an giant airplane to Donald Trump, why aren't they giving aid? I mean, this is all these governments are complicit, right? They're all complicit. The only government that, I hold totally harmless here is Yemen, which is willing to risk everything to stop this crime. Now, I did see a statement yesterday, and again, I don't know if these are just words either, but I saw President Xi Jinping of China said, if Israel doesn't stop this, China will step in. Now, I would like to see that. I really would. But again, up till now, China hasn't done anything either. So, I'm waiting. I'm sitting there waiting. Meanwhile, Palestinians are dying. I mean, it's really, and not just by starvation, the bombings are increasing, and Israeli ground troops are there now too, with tanks, with bulldozers. The bloodletting is worse than it's ever been in Gaza. I mean, it's not even that things are letting up, they're getting worse. And clearly, from Netanyahu's point of view, we know, and he says this, he says, we got to go all the way. I mean, Netanyahu, as they say, if someone tells you what they're about, you better listen. Netanyahu's honest what he's doing. He is not going to let up. He can't let up. His whole political life depends on this war either continuing or going to completion, and that completion means getting rid of all the Palestinians in Gaza, and then he's going to try to get rid of all the Palestinians in the West Bank, and he's already starting to do that too. It is a terrible thing we are witnessing. I don't want people to relax. That's my message. I mean, we have to keep fighting this. This is like, again, people have compared it to being a German during the Holocaust. Like, what would you do then? Well, because you're doing it now. Whatever you're doing now is what you would have done then. Are you fighting? Are you speaking out against this?
There's something else to that I want to add to it. He is leveraging the pain, the suffering, the starvation that he is causing. Let's be very clear. Trump and Joe Biden was causing this level of destruction, this suffering that these people are going through. And he's sitting there virtue signaling, oh, it's so bad. The people are starving. As if he's this kind of impartial actor to all of this, as if he's like on the outskirts, as a third person just kind of watching it take place, like he's one of us looking at it. Oh, it's so bad. It's so horrible. what is happening to the Gazans. Donald Trump is paying for that, meaning the money that he is putting in the bombs that he is giving them. When he is flying in the Ben Gurion airport and they're dropping off bombs and missiles and bullets and those type of things, that's us paying for that. And he's using that because what he wants to do is set a context where he can then say, so we need to move them out of Gaza. It's so bad in Gaza. We need to get them out. We need to take them somewhere else. He's leveraging the pain that he himself is causing for his own political expedience of trying to get rid of the ethnically cleansed that area. That it's disgusting on so many levels.
Well, yeah, and I don't think he's alone in that. I think there's many governments that are basically sacrificing the Palestinian people for their own political ends, right? Including these Arabic governments, which are basically saying, "Oh, look at how terrible the Palestinians are being treated," and then people come out on the streets and protest what's happening in Palestine, and they're fine with that because they're not protesting their own governments, right? That's what they don't want. So they're happy for this terrible thing to keep happening. They keep pointing to that so that people aren't focused on their own problems. The Palestinian peoples are being sacrificed by many governments for their own political ends, and the Palestinians are being abandoned. I mean, there's just not, two ways about it. They are being sacrificed. And again, really, it's only Yemen at this point that's standing for them. And Yemen's one of the poorest countries in the world, can do very little for them, but they are doing what they can. To me, this marks really the end of the United Nations as an institution. And I should say, again, I did teach international human rights law for 12 years. And, one of the things, you got to start, or one of the starting places is the creation of the United Nations and the UN Charter after World War II. One of the big things that was created to stop is, of course, war, the scourge of war, but also genocide. The first human rights convention that was passed after the founding of the UN was the Genocide Convention of 1948.
Yeah.
And you're seeing the UN Charter and the Genocide Convention being ripped up in front of your eyes. If the UN can't step in and stop what's happening, it might as well just shut its doors, sell its building in New York City, and liquidate, because it's useless. And I don't say that lightly. I mean, again, I've made somewhat of a career on teaching about international law and whatnot, and I have lost total faith in it. It is a joke, and it does not make me happy to say that, but that's a reality.
Yeah, I've never seen anything like this. Do you think that this is going to ultimately work? Like, do you think he's really going to be able to transport? I mean, this is what, 2 million people out of Gaza at this point? Like, meaning
that I don't see. I don't see that. And honestly, I don't think in the end that is even the real plan, because it's not very realistic, is it? And that is actually something countries could try to prevent. I mean, again, 1 million people, what are you going to do? Put them all on boats? I mean, I don't see it. I think the real plan is to murder every last Palestinian in Gaza. I mean, and that's what you're seeing happening. It's to totally depopulate Gaza through mass murder and starvation. That's what's happening. I mean, think about it. Israel already has the Rafah crossing between Israel and Egypt shut. If they really wanted, there are many Gazans, because I know many, who, if they could get through that crossing to Egypt, they'd go right now. Why isn't it open if the real plan is to depopulate Gaza through expulsion? They'd open that crossing. They'd open a few crossings. That's not the plan. They're being penned in All exits are closed to them and have been closed for most of the time since October 7th. And Israel's using Gaza as a firing range. Okay? That's all you need to know. Right? They could be forcing people into Egypt as we speak.
But Egypt wouldn't accept them. Egypt has already said that that's a no. I mean, Egypt and Jordan have both
Yeah,
said
well,
we're
Egypt
not
said a
allowed.
lot of things. Egypt also signed a peace deal with Israel back in the 1970s, which is now being violated by the closing of the Rafah crossing, by the control Israel's exerting over the Rafah crossing and the Philadelphia corridor. The point is, Egypt can say all at once. If that crossing were open, Palestinians would come in, and I don't think Egypt would prevent them. In any case, it's not like Israel's testing that, right? They're keeping it shut for a reason, to keep aid from going in and people from going out so that they can carry out mass slaughter. That's it. So that's the plan. It's a terrible plan, but you have to see the facts for what they are. I don't see how else to interpret what is happening. Because let me just tell you, before the Rafah crossing was closed, and I know this, I've been to Egypt twice since October 7th, 100,000 Palestinians went into Egypt. And I know some. I mean, I know some very well.
And they accepted them. They didn't prevent them from coming in.
That's right. I'm in touch with those people, So now Egypt made them, we've talked about this, made them pay, most of them pay to get in, thousands of dollars, which was terrible, but they let them in if they paid. And they did let some wounded in too. That's the other thing. Egypt, even right now, would allow wounded in, right? Especially women and children. They would do that. They were doing that before the Rafah crossing was closed. Is Israel letting that happen? No. If they really wanted to depopulate the place, they'd even let that happen. They're not letting it happen. It is a turkey shoot. That is what this is, and it's so infuriating, because if we get to a point where every last man, woman, and child is killed in Gaza, the West is just going to, sorry, that was never the intention. It was always about Hamas, but oops, that happened, and that's what we do every time. I mean, I'm sorry to go on a rant, but look at Vietnam. We killed 3 to 4 million Vietnamese, mostly women and children. We poisoned their country with Agent Orange and napalm, and then just walked away. And oops, sorry, Charlie. And, you can say the same with Libya. We destroyed Libya. We destroyed Iraq. We destroyed Afghanistan, Korea. And then we just move on and everyone forgets about it. I mean, it's a sickness. And the goal is to kill the Palestinian people and then for everyone to forget about them. Destroy all remnants that they ever existed. And that's why this plan that Trump talks about of, then we're just going to build a Las Vegas or whatever
on their
over
bones.
the remains of the Palestinian people. That is the plan, my friend, unless something's done. That is the plan.
So Europe has the UK, France, Spain, some of these other countries in Europe, after nearly 2 years of a genocide being committed and starvation, because the starvation didn't just start. I mean, if you remember, Israel was counting calories in order to ensure a certain amount of caloric content was going into the area. And even under Joe Biden, Joe Biden was saying, oh, we need 300 trucks. Israel was sending in like 30 trucks. So there was always starvation going on, even from the very beginning. I mean, this goes back to the Biden administration, where, if you remember, Joe Biden changed the report. Blinken, Biden changed the report from the U.S. government saying that Israel was starving the population because it would have forced certain laws to come into play. The people who were under Biden, who wrote that report, resigned as a protest. but they still put out a dodgy report that no, they're not starving the population at all. So the starvation didn't just happen. Nevertheless, Europe has come out and put out a strongly worded statement. They put out a press release saying, as humanitarian donors, we have two straightforward messages for the government of Israel: allow a full resumption of aid into Gaza immediately and enable the UN and humanitarian organizations to work independently and impartially to save lives, reducing suffering, and maintain dignity. We remain committed to meeting the acute needs we see in Gaza. Okay, I don't know what the hell that line means, the acute needs. We also reiterate our firm message to Hamas must immediately release all the remaining hostages and allow humanitarian assistance to be distributed without interference. So this is the other lie, right? That Hamas is somehow preventing humanitarian aid from getting in when they let aid in, which is a pretty convenient, trope. Because then you could say, well, we're not letting in aid because Hamas withholds the aid from the population.
Of course.
Then it says, it's our firm conviction that the immediate return of a ceasefire and working towards implementation of a two-state solution are the only way to bring peace and security to the Israelis and Palestinians and ensure long-term stability for the whole region. Netanyahu, of course, told them to go F themselves. He put out a tweet saying, basically, you don't even have to read the entire tweet. The tweet is effectively, you're allowing Hamas to win by putting out your statement like that, which is astonishing. It took them nearly 2 years to put out a strongly worded statement of a quote unquote threats. Do you think this is the same thing as Joe Biden? I agree with you. I believe in what people do, not what these politicians say. And this is them now saying this after watching this take place for nearly 2 years.
Of course. Because one of the people saying this is Keir Starmer of the UK. Meanwhile, the UK is providing, aerial, intelligence to Israel for its bombing of Gaza. This is, again, it's all theater. Look, they have to say something. The West has premised all of its carnage over the years on supporting human rights. They've, premised all of their mass murders around the world on the basis of supporting human rights, which was always absurd.
Yeah.
But at least they had a fig leaf for what they were doing. So now they've been exposed in Gaza. What was all this talk about humanitarian intervention, and you're supporting this carnage on a scale we've never seen? Well, they have to say something to condemn it, because all of their
population,
their mask has fallen, right?
Yeah.
And but again, what are they going to do? Anything to stop what's happening? I don't see it. It's disgusting to me. It really is. I don't have words to express my disdain for what is happening.
I agree with you. I agree with you on this. I have to be honest with you. I never thought I would be watching this. I know, some of the people in the region that I talk to, they're not surprised. I got to be honest, I am. If you would have told me 2 years ago that we would be sitting here watching social media day after day after day, kids get mangled, kids get bombed, kids get shot, women and children, ambulances, hospitals, schools, UN buildings. And let's be very clear, they're systematically destroying every building for the sole purpose of saying, well, there's nowhere to go, so you need to leave. Or as you point out, they exterminate the entire population. And we are just sitting here watching. It's just mind-blowing to me. That's all. It's just mind-blowing. Daniel, and by the way, you pointed out that the UN could get involved if they wanted to. Gutierrez. It's just weird to me that all of them are starting to say something at the exact same time.
Yeah, it is.
That part is strange to me.
I think they're panicking. They're losing their populations. Again, the polls show people don't buy this anymore. They don't support Israel. They have to say something to maintain some air of legitimacy. I mean, again, what is Guterres doing? What is he doing to justify his existence? Nothing. I mean, again, the UN should just have a fire sale and close up. Of course he has to say something.
Daniel, I appreciate your analysis, man. I really do. I woke up this morning and I saw all of these posts. Donald Trump forces Israel, is threatening Israel. And I'm like, dude, we've done this last week where all of these posts were coming out about the rift between Trump and Netanyahu. And it's like, how on earth does social media, mainstream media, run with these, I don't know, these media managed articles? When if you talk to Trump, Trump tells you flat out, yeah, there's no deviation. Netanyahu tells you flat out, we're going all out. We're going to finish this. Like, meaning they're telling you what they're doing. They're telling you they're working in coordination. And they still run it in media. And WAPO, random anonymous source says this. And because it's such an explosive headline, everywhere runs it without
well,
any
not just
underlying
because
reality.
not just because it's explosive, but because the media is also complicit in the genocide. So they have to give people hope that it's going to end because they're also part of this, right?
Couldn't do it
They've
without them.
covered for Israel for since 1948, but especially since October 7th, so they're embarrassed too. So they have to give people some hope this is going to end. This is all 1984 stuff. George Orwell wouldn't even write 1984 now. I mean, it writes itself. You don't need AI to write it. It's right being written before your very eyes.
No, I agree with you. And I'm going to let you go, but the entire trip to Saudi Arabia was that way to me. Donald Trump gives a speech where he says, Iran cannot get a bomb. Okay, even our own assessment says Iran is not trying to get a bomb. Then he says they need to stop supporting terror. As he shakes the hand of head chopper Jelani and calls him a good-looking guy, etc. And you're like, okay, dude, are you being serious right now? Like, are you really?
No, yeah.
Is this really what you are really presenting to us as reality in this moment? Like, it's outrageous. I mean, it runs across the board, right? Even when you're talking about Ukraine, like Trump is acting like he's a mediator and he's not part of the conflict.
Right.
And yet he's sending weapons and bombs and intelligence over to Ukraine as they continue the war, even though he's acting as a mediator. Like, I'm not part of this. I'm just, I'm a third man out. And even in that conversation, when he's talking to Brett Baer, and Brett Baer is asking him effectively like about the Gazans, and he's like, "Oh, it's such a horrible case." And Brett Baer never brings up, "Yeah, but you're paying 80% of that. Couldn't you just stop the money and the weapons when they, with the humanitarian aid?" He never brings it up. He never brings it up. Even with Jelani, he never points out, "Hey, but wasn't that guy chopping heads? Wasn't that guy killing Americans? Like, wasn't that guy part of leadership of ICE?" They never bring it up. It's just amazing.
These questions are never asked. They're never asked of our presidents either. We went to war in Iraq based on a lie. Everyone knows it's a lie now. And yet George W. Bush still gets a front row seat at Jimmy Carter's funeral. Does anyone in the press ever say, hey, do you feel bad about the fact you lied to us and murdered all these Iraqis for nothing? No one asks those questions. They never do. And that's why the show like this is very important, because we ask those questions. That's the key.
Dan Kovalik, American human rights, labor rights lawyer, political activist, previously taught international human rights at the University of Pittsburgh School of Law. One last question. I'm just curious. You taught human rights. This has to be just mind-blowing to you.
It's heartbreaking to me. By the way, I was in Chicago O'Hare Airport, and a former student of mine stopped me, and she was very friendly. I mean, I really did love my students, and I really love teaching. And again, now, and I'm actually considering teaching in Bangladesh. I was offered a job there to teach international human rights. But yeah. But it's a very hard thing to teach now, given what's happening. It really is demoralizing. So, but that is what it is.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate you, man. I really do.
Thank
you.
you. I appreciate you. You're a good guy. Really. I love you, man. You take care.
Oh, I try. You have a good one. Be safe.
You too.
All right. We have come to the end. I want to get to my chats before we close. It's such a depressing topic. It is aggravating because you would think that the first time around where Trump is like, or they're putting out Trump is split with Netanyahu, that would give people this kind of, oh, wait, we've done this before. It doesn't. It doesn't seem to register. Lab 66, compliments correcto sobre Senior Bakuris. I am not in a position to correct Alexander Bakuris. I just disagree with him on whether or not Europe believes what Ukraine is putting out. And that's all. Lab 66, as a European, I don't know about European political leaders. I can believe that they're chosen for their obedience and not for their beliefs or their intelligence. You know, that's what Brian was Berletic. Yeah, Brian Berletic said that these guys are not chosen for intelligence. Like, it's more so obedience to a particular cause. Because look, I've asked Europeans, like, why do they believe America on this stuff? Like, why do they follow the US, even when it's their own detriment? And you know, I haven't necessarily got the best of answers. Let's see, what's this one? Mimi B. Hi, Jamal. China has stepped up and provided humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip. The U.S. is absolutely losing the narrative that we are the hero. I saw that. That was more complicated. China didn't force that aid in. That was more complicated. I saw that. I saw the social media post about it, but there was somewhat of a correction associated with that. China did say that they may, you know, get involved, but I don't know what it means for them to get involved in this way. We obviously lost the narrative that we're the hero. I mean, Donald Trump is our president, right? He's the worst, or you can say the best face, in the way that Joseph, what is his last name? Kavanaugh would say that Trump is the best face for the American empire. I think he is. I think Kavanaugh's right. I mean, but keep in mind, Biden and Trump has the same policy on this. There was no deviation. At no point did Joe Biden push Netanyahu. And Joe Biden was making requests for Egypt and for Jordan to take the Palestinians. So the ethnic cleansing campaign was something that both wanted to do. Now, whether they can pull it off or not, that's an open question, right? But they definitely wanted to. So yeah. Mr. Riffley, the last time a Democrat talked about looking forward, it was Obama washing the blood of Iraqis off of Joe Biden's hand, off of George Bush's hands. Yes, you're so right. If you remember, for the audience, when Obama got in, there was a question about whether or not Obama was going to push for the impeachment of George Bush or the prosecution, because George Bush broke the law. George Bush even wrote in his book that he was like, hell yeah, waterboard him. Okay, waterboard is torture. Torture is against our laws. So you've admitted to breaking U.S. law in your torture regime that he was effectively running. Guantanamo Bay and the things that they were doing in Guantanamo Bay, those people weren't doing that stuff willy-nilly. George Bush approved of the torture, just to be very clear. And so the question becomes, okay, well, what does Obama do when he gets in office? Is he going to enshrine it to say this is a no? This is not something we're going to allow. This is not something that we as the United States are going to do. And by prosecuting a former president over this, we're going to set this as a standard going forward. This is not something that we're going to allow. Obama didn't do that. Obama said we're going to look forward. We're not going to look back. And every cultish Democrat says, they applauded him. Go back and watch that clip of Nancy Pelosi, where Pelosi is asked about George Bush saying weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. And Pelosi says, we knew he was lying. We knew he was lying. And they still didn't go after him for it. They still didn't impeach him for lying us into a war, getting, thousands of Americans killed, getting 1 million Iraqis killed in that process. At no point were they ever willing to prosecute him for it. And then they turn around and say, we need to impeach Donald Trump because of a conversation he had on the phone. Mr. Riffley, spot on memory. Good job. Spending on unserviceable debt equals counterfeiting. Yeah, they're just printing money. They're just printing money. And to make it even worse, they're printing money to give it to themselves. Even worse. Stephen Hayes, Mr. Ripley, we got to get out of this place. Jamal's no recognition. What? Oh, okay. Okay, Stephen Hayes. I understand that you want your posts immediate. If you want your post immediate, you don't have to post. Starving children and burning tents. Is it good for Lockheed Martin stock price? Oh, that is the question, Stephen Hayes. That is the question. Yeah, that's the question. That's grotesque, right? But it's true. I work for a non-weapon company acquired by Lockheed Martin, so my pension is now funding this crime. I'm sorry to hear that, Stephen Hayes. I'm sorry to hear that. I mean, on one side, at the very least, it's stock price, but Jesus Christ, that's grim. But you're all right. I mean, think of the guns, think of the bombs, think of all those things that are being made. And everyone that's dropped needs to be replaced, right? And when they get replaced, the US government has to pay money to get those things replaced. Who replaces them? Yeah. Laugh 66. Please share the clip of the little girl giving a smile to the camera, getting her leg bandaged after she lost her little legs, posted by Professor Morandi earlier today. Hashtag Gaza Holocaust. I cannot show that clip, Laugh. YouTube would not allow me to show that clip. YouTube would not allow me to show that clip. And, you know, Professor Morandi did point out that many people stopped watching his channel because of the grim stuff. You shouldn't look away, right? But God, it's so grotesque. And even like not seeing it to that level. I mean, I've watched people have their heads blown up. I've watched kids burned to death. That stuff is rough. And it fucks with you. Like it. When I was talking to Morandi before the interview started, I was like, that stuff makes you cynical. And he was like, well, you shouldn't be cynical because they want your cynicism. They want you to believe it can't change, and it doesn't change. And I think he's right. And cynicism may be too strong. It's just, it makes you darker. I put it that way. It makes you realize that what could take place is worse than what you ever thought could take place. And you're damaged, or somehow, I guess, given reality, more so in a certain way. He pointed out that he was part of a chemical weapons attack. And he was like, when you see that and when you realize that other governments were paying for that to take place, your point of view changes. You lose this innocence that you have, that sociopaths won't behave in certain ways. You know that anything is effectively open and they would do anything in order to accomplish their agenda. That's a dark place to be, but that's a more realistic place to be, I suppose. And I guess on some level, we're all losing our innocence watching this take place. Laugh. I can't show it. Jamal, you do not share super chats on screen. It's an insult to your audience. No, Stephen, it's just an insult to you. I have the same policy the entire way through. My guests is giving their commentary. I think it's an insult to the guests to have this stuff pop up under the guests. Who knows what the hell people are going to put in super chats? Sometimes it's not in association with what the guest is effectively saying. I get to super chats at the end of the show, as I always do. It's just standard. Do you like cheese? Ara Heyman. I do like cheese. I do like cheese. For instance, that chat would have came up right under Daniel Kovalik as he was talking about people being killed. Do you like cheese? Stephen Hayes, I'm sorry that we're in disagreement with the super chat stuff. I get to my super chats every show, meaning those super chats gets aired, those super chats gets talked about every show. And I've done that for the entire time I've done this show. I would hope that you're okay with that. I would hope you understand my rationale for it. We may disagree on it, but it's not an insult to the audience, especially since all of them gets aired. Providing they're not racist, sexist, bigoted, all of them gets talked about. And sometimes, by the way, I would do it in the show if it, well, today I didn't have guests, so it's a little bit weird. All super chats are read, Stephen. I'm sorry that you disagree with the way it's done. All right. Bright Flowers, Jamal, Dan, for another great show. I can't call this a great show. This show was fuckery. This show was fuckery. The USA failing humanity in the world. The world is failing the world. The world is failing the world. Sensei, oh, thank you. PC, shout out to you. Do your thing. The Mori, what is this? Muslim Ma, 57 watching. Yeah, we had a decent audience. We got up to 600. Just on me, we got up to 600. That is shocking to me. That is shocking to me. I lost respect for America after watching what Israel has done under the cover of the big Satan in the USA. Chris Fisher, you and I both. You and I both. You and I both. Obama said we tortured some folks, but that was history's skeptical jerk. Yeah. Do you remember he came down in tans? I think it was a tan suit. The torture report came out. And in this folksy Obama way, we tortured some folks. And because he said in a folksy way, it made it okay that we did it. Like the shit that we do is amazing. Shit that we do is amazing. A large portion of the U.S. doesn't take the U.S. serious. Well, I just show it. Large portion of the U.S. doesn't take the U.S. seriously. Trump seriously. The EU only takes him seriously in a threatening sense. No one takes Trump seriously except for those who still thinks he's a savior. That's true, but let's be honest, though. He still has power. In the context of power, he's allowing all of these people to get killed or potentially starting a war with Iran or not stopping a war with Russia. Meaning, whether they take him seriously or not, he has power to do stuff or to not do stuff. And, there's that. My thumbs up showing 19. Hopefully they get there more. Charlotte Ruse, I can't watch. Yeah, it's rough to watch. It is rough to watch. It's reality. Yes, that's true. OCC doc. It's true. It's reality. I guess I'm saying if you have a perception of the world, let's say, and your perception of the world is we would not allow a genocide. It's just, we wouldn't allow it. It's just something that's off the table for us to allow. And then you watch one. What does it do to you? And don't you, on some level, lose innocence? Because on some level, the belief that the world wouldn't allow such a thing is innocence. That's a position that you hold as a virtue of sorts, as a what's the word I'm looking for? It's not virtue, it's a benefit, it's a bonus, as a luxury. But it's like children believing that puppies don't die, or that babies don't get cancer. Babies do get cancer. Puppies do get hit by cars. People do, torture cats and animals. Those are also parts of reality. People kill people. People go to war and murder people in the context of those wars. You lose that innocence by watching it. But what you're watching is reality. I hope that makes sense. It's just wow. Let's see. Cherie, I saw you in here somewhere. Lucky Martin of the Smokeless Flame. Yep. YouTube is only showing 2 likes on this video, and mine was second. Hopefully there are more. I always tell people like and share. I like Army and military stuff. Patrick Neal. I do too, but this shit is dark. I agree with you. Donald Tyrant Tangerine Trump of the White People's White House is not my president, nor any others. Cherie, I had to tell you this. He is indeed your president. By law, he is your president. He has control of the military. He's been using it to kill people abroad. He is your president. That is also a reality. All right. I'm going to call this one a day because this show has been fuckery. Oh, we have one more. Twisted Reality. Enjoy you since the first Bernie run. Start my day with you every morning. Thanks. Well, thank you too, Twisted Reality. I appreciate that. Thank you for that. Stephen, I hope you stay, man. And I hope you continue to give super chats. And I will consider, in between guests, running those chats. That might be a middle ground between it. I don't want you to feel like you would never get me to believe you're being persecuted. So cut that shit out. But from the standpoint or disrespecting my chat, when I do the same thing every show, and chat pretty much knows how I do my chats, I will consider, though, doing the chat in between shows. I think Sabrina deserves in between guests. I would consider doing that. It's a memory thing. I know I get to them at the end of the show. And so it's just kind of standard. But I don't want you to feel aggrieved and walk away thinking that I don't care. All right, I'm going to end this. This has been fuckery, man. This show has been fuckery. I prefer having guests. I don't like to carry a show, especially when I'm doing it on the fly and I don't know that I have to carry a show. It's one thing if I know, okay, for that first hour, I'm going to have to do a segment. I do not want to do 2 hours of a show by myself. But we did it. We got up to 600 people, nonetheless. So we had a really good crowd. I apologize that my guests didn't show up. I have no idea what the fuck went on with either of them. My chat is beeping, so I would imagine that's them telling me why they weren't able to show up this morning. You know how I feel about that? My show is sacred. Don't fuck with my show. I don't like it. All right, guys, you have a good one. Chats at the end, please. Well, Melvin, it's not a, I don't think it damages the show to have an in-between guest. And I think, like I said, I think Sabrina does hers that way. Sabrina, by the way, runs a damn good show. If you get the opportunity to catch her show, definitely check her out. Sabby Sabs. She has a cadence that just works for a show. It's different than my show, but it works. It's similar. Like she does domestic politics predominantly. I think, if I remember correctly, she does chats in between her segments. So let's say she's talking about one segment, then she goes to another, she checks chats. So that might not be a bad idea. I'm not entirely against it. We'll play it by ear. We'll see. I don't want Steven running away thinking he's been blown off. All right, guys, you have a fantastic day. I will see you guys bright and early tomorrow. Hopefully my guys show up tomorrow. There's that. Have a good one. Be safe. I'll see you in the morning.